All right, everybody. Looks like we are live. Welcome back to another lovely episode of the I almost said Oversharing Show. No, this is not the Oversharing Show. We'll go check that show out. This is the Brandon Bonanza Show. And I do have a guest that we've had on the Oversharing Show twice, Joe. But before we get into that, I'm going to do what I do all the time. And I'm going to start with a quote. And today's quote is from Bill Cooper. Or I guess his name was Milton William Cooper. Listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nothing unless you could prove it in your own right. And that is from the late Bill Cooper. I mean, allegedly, right? You know, who knows if he was. But anyway, Joe, how's it going? Welcome, Joe, to the Brandon Bonanza. I'm very excited to have you today. We have some really awesome conversations through Telegram. And I figured we'd bring some of that so the people can get it.
Sounds like a plan. Hello, everybody out there, you wonderful, wonderful people.
He still hasn't figured out his camera situation, but that's all right. I think it's more mysterious when you just get to look at the letters of his name like, Joe P. I guess we could talk a little bit about Bill Cooper, because I'm not saying that I totally agree with this quote where he says, listen to everyone, read everything. But I think it more in the context of what you're going to get into if you're going to search something, or if you're going to try to have something fall into your belief system. It's a good idea to look at all points of view, and then whatever makes sense inside of you, then you could view that, I guess, as truth or as your own truth.
Yeah, totally. I guess put it simple, don't be naive.
Yeah, that's one way you could have put it. And I know we've had like conversations or whatever about Bill Cooper in the past and stuff. So how do you think that he's helped you along, I guess you could say, your path to truth, or whatever this is that we're on?
I don't know, man. He was just one of the first ones when I was going down the rabbit holes, one of the first names I came up with. It was not just him. Everybody's heard of David Icke, Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tessarion. Bill Cooper just happened to be one of the first. It was just like later, as I was figuring stuff out and feeling I'm actually getting closer to the truth, which it came out more of spiritual work, I began to look at least the conspiracy truther kind of stuff and see that Bill Cooper seemed to be more right than everyone else. So that's kind of how I am with Bill Cooper. I don't really listen to Bill Cooper anymore. I've shared stuff on my Contemplations of Spirit channel, just to archive it, stuff that I thought was helpful back in the day, like Mystery Babylon or some of the interviews he's done. Sometimes in an episode, I'll put like a 5 or 10 minute line from Bill Cooper from one of his recordings or something like that to build an overall context. But I don't really don't look into truth and conspiracy stuff as often as you would think. I really am not too interested, because the more I know, the more I know how little I know. And I try to hold humility to the best of my ability, and I try to form a working theory, which might be true to a certain degree, maybe not. But I'm also not going to be naive, I guess, and jump to conclusions, because I've jumped to a lot of conclusions in the past, and I later figured out I was wrong. I was like, oh shit, I'm wrong. So what was the quote? It'll come back to me later.
No problem. We have some people in the chat. Shout out to Shannon. She says, greetings, everyone. Thank you, Shannon. We love you so much. Thank you for coming here. Chris, aka Quiet Sparky Bear, this expanded schedule crushes. He said crashes, but he meant crushes. Joe, thank you for your contemplations. And Nigel says, Bill Cooper was my first truth book. Yeah, I remember Behold the Pale White Horse. That was an interesting read, to say the least.
Yeah, totally. I still have that book. I drew out all my truther books a long time ago, but I still have that one, because it's nothing but a bunch of documents. And there's certain things in there that are really important to know for a lot of reasons, not just from the truther angle, but to understand metaphysics and stuff like that. Like Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, for example. Like that's a must read to understand the system that we live in. We kind of have to understand that document, whether it's a legit document or not. Somebody in the know wrote that document. Maybe not, a controller, so to speak, as it's presented, but somebody knew what they were talking about, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny because in 2020 I was kind of introduced to this idea of what do they call it? It's basically when they revelation of method. That's it. So I was introduced to this idea of revelation of method and what it meant and what it was. And a lot of this truther stuff, I've come to realize that they, or if there is even a they, well, I'm sure we're going to get into that. Is it a they or an it? Remember that one, folks. We'll come back to that. But do they even really care? And then to some certain extent, do they or it, whatever, do they want this information out there? And it seems to me like it does benefit some control system when you're letting this information out there and you have people tacitly agreeing to the stuff that you're doing to them at the end of the day. So I think it's interesting because at first, when I was more, I guess you could say, quote unquote, into conspiracy, I always thought that, they don't want us to know all this stuff. And then as I progressed in my journey, I realized I'm like, oh no, not only maybe do they want us to know this stuff, but maybe they want us to shout it from the rooftops and tell everybody about it, because maybe that's some part of how their plan gets put into motion, because these ideas get put into the consciousness. And even if people don't agree with them, it's the first step into getting anything put out in and done, is you let everybody know your plan, and then they kind of somehow follow along with it, right? It's like the Pied Piper.
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be an element. The other part of it is a lot of people are not ready for this information, and they become fearful or and therefore polarized. And then a polarized person is extremely easy to control, because you just have to say white and they say black out of a knee-jerk kind of reaction. So fear is an extremely polarizing energy. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people out there I've noticed in like the truth community, the majority, that they have a chip on their shoulder. They have a pointing the finger at the bad guy kind of mentality, thinking that, oh, everything would be so great if it was for these wicked controllers out there doing their wicked things. And not to say that there's not like really grabbly people that are doing it for their own agendas and for their own, whatever. But I've come to realize that a lot of these people are trying to do a good thing. Just they the means justify the ends. So if they have to kill a million fucking people to eventually have a world without war, they'll do it, and they'll sleep soundly at night doing it.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little more, because I love how you put that before when we were talking about it. And kind of like the Freemasons, right? We'll say, and we're not talking about like, your everyday person that goes to the Freemason lodge and drinks and just treats it as like a club to hang out with and get away from their wife or whatever. But people, we could just use the Freemasons or whoever you think is this other people are part of like the Illuminati or the them or whatever. We've talked about before how they actually, in their own mind, they think they're doing the great work. They think that they're actually healing society and bringing it together through whatever means necessary. And like you said, it doesn't matter who gets hurt, but as long as the great work is done, the ends justify the means, or kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Like this is like, I don't believe we live in an evil realm. I don't think this is evil. I think it's kind of insane, but we've all kind of I feel this realm is an insane asylum. It's here to hold you as long as you think and contextualize things in a certain way that you come here, for instance. But there are people out there that are trying on every level of society, from your average Joe to your
Ah,
you
so
know,
your average Brandon. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, your
Sorry.
average Brandon, your average Joe, whoever, the average boots on the ground person, all the way up into these people with massive amounts of power because of their position in society, their position there in their current incarnation, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody is trying to do the good. They just don't know what the good is, which was attributed to, I believe, Socrates. And that is a fact. If you can admit it or not, that is a fact. That's a universal fact. Is everybody is trying to do the good. They just don't know what the good is. And everybody's contextualizing things in a different way because they have a different level of consciousness. And um, they're doing their best. Everybody's doing their best. And some of these people that are in these, they're like gods looking at them because they can fart one way and change society. But they seem to have a lot of power, and what power comes responsibility. That's kind of how they see it. That I think that was kind of a truth drop they put in that Spider-Man thing. That a lot of these people, well, that's truly what they teach in things like Freemasonry is, you get this knowledge, you get this power, and now, okay, now you're joined the brotherhood, the fraternity of builders, and now we're all going to work together for the great work, and it's beyond you. It's kind of like in the Fight Club. I don't know if I'm sure everybody's seen Fight Club before, where it's like you're not a special little snowflake. We're working towards something bigger than you. You're just whatever. Or you see that actually in a lot of army units, and I know for sure in the Marines, right? Like they're like you're a Marine. It doesn't matter. Like you go down, you like if the Marines live forever, like kind of thing. It's the same thing with like the fraternal orders with like Freemasonry. They just have a different mission.
Yeah, 100%. They used to say to us, the primary objective is troop. It's a mission accomplishment and then troop welfare.
Mhm.
I didn't quite understand what they were saying back then, but now I get it. They're like, no, our job is to accomplish the mission first, and then second is to take care of the troops. It's like, oh. And once I got into the fleet, that translated into, sometimes you're working 24 hours to get this plane going so
Yeah.
it can meet its mission. And we're going to maybe feed you and maybe let you get some sleep. But yeah, it's,
For
if
the
you just,
greater good.
yeah, exactly, for the greater good. And it's funny because a lot of people who point the fingers at the they or the them or the Illuminati or whoever that run this world, they might not understand. They think they're just evil and they're trying to bring in this evil, whatever world, but they don't realize that a lot of these people, maybe even all of them, have this mindset they're actually doing good work. Their intent, it's like the road to hell is paved to good intentions. Their intentions are awesome while they're paving this giant road to hell. But you can use that, though, if you realize that's probably what's going on. You can actually use that to get out of like a victim narrative and also like a narrative of hate. Because I think just like in, Luke Skywalker with the Emperor's like, use your hate, cast me down, and you'll become, your transformation will be complete to the dark side. And I think really what he meant was like, no matter how I mean, even if you do destroy me, I don't care because I just want you to come to the dark side. And a lot of truthers or a lot of people who are pointing the finger, that's what they're doing. They're using their hate and their anger in a way that's going to consume them. Not like, I'm not saying you should just not have any hate or anger. If you have that come up, deal with it. You try to learn to either let it go, but you accept it. But to come at a lens of total hate or total anger and just pointing the finger, I think that's an easy way to get consumed and by it, and just have a shitty life, if nothing else.
Yeah, not to mention be totally possessed by this energy, like, and have it do it. It thinks for you, this energy. Like everybody can, think back of when you're angry or whatever, and then you come out of it and you're like, man, what? Oh man, I was such a jerk or whatever. Like you turn into a totally different person, is because those energies are what are directing consciousness, and to be stuck in these energies. And the biggest one I see in truthers is well, yeah, anger and fear, depending on who we're talking about. But the biggest one is pride, like this cocky arrogance of thinking you know something because you watched 300 hours of something on YouTube. Like
Yeah, exactly. Nigel in the chat said anger helps testosterone and lifts, and then he just put a smiley face. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not saying it's totally bad, but to be consumed by anything. And what's up, Sammy? Sammy's in there. El Jupiter, how you doing? Good fellas, she said. That's something we talked about last night, the good fellas, because it was like I think we were talking about the controllers or whatever, some of these people, these families, even back then they were called the good ones, like the good men. And then today, like gangsters are called good fellas. It's like
Mhm.
it goes back to what we were saying. They're doing in their mind, they're doing the great work, right? They're good guys. That's how they view
Yeah.
themselves.
And in many ways they are. Unfortunately, that's the truth. In many ways they're not. We live in a very dualistic realm that unfortunately, to keep the system going or to build this insane utopia that a lot of people are striving for, it has some negative consequences. But there's a lot of good consequences. We all reap those good consequences if we want to admit it or not.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I like what you're saying about pride, because you just had a recent episode about that, about pride and people having a chip on their shoulder, especially truthers, and they start to look at people as sheep. Um, so what are some things you could kind of say about that you told that you said in that episode? Some for my audience, some of that gravy.
Pretty much what I just said earlier is you got to learn to have humility and learn that you don't know everything and that you can only construct a working model. You can only a theory, like, but you got to be very careful about what information you put into that theory. But like I said on the oversharing that we did recently, like truth is not like a black and white kind of thing. It's more of a dimmer switch kind of thing. You get truth in degree, and by admitting that you don't know something, ironically, you often get some of the puzzle pieces, but that you would never have seen. You never have, unless you opened up to that grace, to that higher context, and humility and learning to have compassion for people is the highest things you can do. You have to do the spiritual work, because I've been noticing that over the years that a lot of people don't do the spiritual work, and so either they're going to come up with a working model based off of their belief systems. I think Robert Anton Wilson used to say belief systems are appropriately abbreviated BS, that you begin to believe your BS, um, and you form a sort of a reality tunnel through the level of consciousness you're at, and you'll construct something that of a half truth if you're lucky. If you're, it's a spectrum, like Sharon put last time. But but by opening up to a higher context, you'll be able to take in more information and still be able to have like a love in your heart. Because the bottom line is, if you kind of really looked at the truth without doing the spiritual work first, while opening the heart chakra first, like it will drive you into apathy and despair. Like, because it really does look fucking hopeless if you look at it from the structural level sometimes. However, if you see it from the higher truth, that there's things that go on in this realm, like cycles, and that everybody's trying to do the greatest good, and on and on and on. You see all these things, and then you don't contextualize it in such a negative energy field, and then you might not know certain things, but like I said, certain things seem to come to you after you do hold that kind of higher energy, and sometimes they don't. Maybe they will some 10 years, 20 years from now. Who knows? I can look at my consciousness 10 years ago and see how it's radically different than the one that's speaking to you now. This is not the same entity. This is like it's talking to you right now that it was 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago. And yeah, you always strive for growth, but you can't grow if you don't open up into to these like higher energies. And one of the biggest things that keep you from getting stuck is trying to hold like a level of humility and say, okay, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know, which is, I guess, another thing I was attributed to Socrates, but the truth is universal, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And so what do you think, I guess this would get us in the conversation about the it over the they. What do you think it was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Now I know that you've come across different information, so you could just say it's well, I just figured this out, so this and that. But do you think that you were vibrating maybe on some kind of different level, and there's like an entity somehow either controlling you, or maybe I like the way you put it with the iron files in the field and everything like that, the iron filings, that's what I'm thinking of, in the magnetic field. What do you think it was exactly that was animating you at that time?
Depends. I mean, talking 10 years ago, I was kind of, I would say kind of neutral. I was indifferent. I wasn't negative, but I was like, fuck it. Like, I was just like, oh, fuck it. Let's go have a beer, smoke some weed, whatever. Um, feel high, because it came to a point where I don't feel high anymore when I smoke weed. Like, I haven't smoked in like 6 years, but I got to a point where didn't get high anymore. I got low. You only get high if it's lifting you. Like, at some point it lowers you, and it just and that was like something I used to smoke a lot of weed from the time I was 12 until about 6 years ago. And then, like, all of a sudden overnight I would smoke, and instead of getting relaxed and being able to sleep, I'd get paranoid and anxious and fearful. And so you do that a couple times, you're like, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. And then that addiction is broken. But that seems to be how it goes for with everything as well. It's like, once you contextualize something different, once you see that, like, for instance, we'll take the one like Owen always uses, porn. Like, once you see what's going on, like pornography, you see the bigger picture, and then you realize, okay, you can't like be against pedophilia and watch porn, because if no pedophilia, no abused women, no porn. Like, or you can see these energy fields in their eyes of the women and the men, and then it just repulses you, and then you can't do it anymore. And then the next thing it's not part of your existence. It's not part of your field of consciousness anymore. The thought doesn't arise anymore. And that's how addictions are broken. That's the whole thing of the 12-step program, which I found out later on after studying David R. Hawkins, when he talked a lot about the 12-step program, because he was in Alcoholics Anonymous back in the 60s, and Narcotics Anonymous, that the whole 12 steps are pretty much getting you to a higher energy field, to a different magnetic field, so the iron filings get arranged in a more coherent manner. Oh, how did James put it, Brandon? Like, what sin was, because he had the
Oh
really good
yeah.
definition of sin.
He said that sin was disorder, something like that. Maybe he'll pop in and he could tell us, because last time I forgot to. Dysfunction, I think it was.
Yeah, exactly. That's those are the patterns that those iron filings are getting arranged by those lower negative energies. And yeah, within those lower energies are consciousnesses that you would call demons, like structural consciousness patterns, much like how you are structured as a human being, like an ego, a personality. Like we were talking about the 16 personality things, how there's like 16 main archetypes that people seem to incarnate into, to how they process information and whatnot. There's those same kind of structural patterns have existed in certain energy fields for eons, probably way beyond our ability to even comprehend. And we call those structural patterns demons. So when you're tapped into certain energies, like demons are very misunderstood, because people have like a very cartoony kind of idea about it. But it's kind of like, for instance, a good, like an actor taking on a character, like that character has existed in this field like for eons, like not new under the sun, so to speak. And like you tapped into it like this certain kind of archetype, and you put it into how it interacts in like a modern world, and then you get like a character like the Joker, for instance. And certain people have tapped into these demons and lost it, like Keith Ledger, for example, or many of cultists have fallen. but but technically speaking, those demons are part of all of our consciousness, and come and go in the background all the time. enough to make you paranoid. I know, but it's nothing you can do about it. But if you don't vibrate on those energy fields they exist on, they can't touch you. It's the same way like a radio station. If you change the dial to another radio station, like you don't know what's on that other channel anymore. It might as well not exist. So it's the same thing with that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, we all have our demons, so to speak, because we all have our negative energy. Even if we're of a baseline higher consciousness, you still, like the Buddha said with Mara, you still have those energies floating through, like the weather, the psychic weather. The weather, as we understand it in meteorology, is very similar to how psychic weather passes through our own consciousness as we go about the realm.
Yeah, I love that you brought in Mara, because it's highlighted really well in Buddhism that no matter how high your consciousness or you elevate your consciousness, there's always going to be some kind of temptation. There's always like a voice in your head that's going to say, oh, now you have this, we'll call it like a power, right? Now you have this ability. So why don't you use it? And then a lot of people will look at it as a negative or evil thing. They think it's like all these evil voices, but sometimes it's just like you have this power now to like, because some people have been said to been able to heal people just because they're being in their presence or whatever. And if you start to believe that these people are being healed, like say I'm the one, people come near me and they just get healed. If I start to believe it's me, just my little person or whatever inside me, and then I could start to fall into that trap again, and lose consciousness or not lose consciousness, lower in consciousness, because I believed that voice, or I believed that it was actually me doing it, and it wasn't, I guess you could say God or the consciousness itself doing it. I was like, oh, it's just me doing it,
Mm. Yeah, that's how a lot of people in their lifetimes have done something that they were literally possessed by those things I was just talking about, and in these negative energies, because they're just iron filings that happen in the astral that happen to be in these energy fields that are kind of a part of this realm and tied into our biology, like your reptile brain that we have. Like you can't get rid of your reptile brain. Like it's doing what it's supposed to do, and it keeps you like that energy can always kind of come and go. It's learning to expand, so it doesn't take a hold of you anymore. And that's kind of like what meditation and contemplation is all about. So you can kind of like sit back and watch it and realize, hey, those dots are not mine. Those fucked up dots are not mine. What the fuck is going on? Like they're just passing through. And if you don't like resist them and you just let them pass through, eventually the energy like dissipates and disappears, and then like it's not a problem. It might come back. Like I said, the consciousness of the human experience is a lot like the weather that we experience on the outside world, quote unquote. So it's nothing to beat yourself up if you have a fucked up dot, where you're like it's you kind of realize that I'm not my dots. Like okay, it's this fucking dot coming through. Oh, I recognize that's a chip on my shoulder. That's pride. Like that's anger. That's fear. That's guilt. That's grief. Like it's all these the 7 deadly sins. Those energy fields. Like yeah, they got some like nasty little structures within them that have built themselves up over eons, beyond my ability to understand, but they seem to have always been a part of the human.
Yeah, it's kind of like they say, this is just going on forever. It's really hard to tell how long it's been going on. Shout out really quickly to the Duck Crew. Love your shirt. Thank you. Yes, this is my Melodome shirt. Awesome. Austin and James have a show called The Melodome, so check that out on YouTube, and I think it's also on Rockfin and a bunch of other places, and I've had a conversation with both those guys, so you can go back and check those out. Shout out to Nigel. He said, holy shit, Joe is ready. Joe is definitely ready for what, we don't know,
ready for what?
Are you going to recruit him, Nigel? I told you, listen, Nigel, not everyone's ready. No, I'm just kidding. And also what I wanted to say, because I was having a wonderful conversation with my friend Dustin last night, aka Berserker Bear, Bushwhacking History in Buffalo, and we were talking about determinism and free will, and we believe that they kind of exist, both of them exist. And I think what you were saying opened my mind a little bit, because the determinism could be the different energy fields that are out there, right? That's kind of how this realm works. It's going to go according to this energy pattern and the different vibrations that you're on. And then the free will is, you could, by your actions, choose which one you're gonna go on, which energy frequency you're gonna resonate with. And with that choice, then you could decide to do different things, or just go in different directions. Or literally, like you said, if it's iron filings, your iron filings will just go in a different way than other people's will.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. And I was actually, I got to that far into that episode, and I could kind of inject one thing about the deterministic element where you're saying what simulations. Now, I don't believe this is a simulation either. It's, I understand it's a helpful model to wrap your mind around sort of what's going on though. But basically they say, oh, if this is a simulation, or like I said, I think it's more of like a dream world, for lack of a better term. But like you're having a dream, but they say, okay, then you could just do whatever you want. Technically, if you're just in a simulation, it's like, no, not if you want to suffer. Like, not if you want to suffer, because you go into certain energy fields and they have a certain structure. Like James, that's why I like James' definition of sin, because that's very accurate in my opinion. Is no, that you have disorder and eventually chaos and suffering. Like that's kind of the whole Buddhism thing is built around, is trying to rise above suffering. What do you say? Old age, death, sickness, blah blah blah. There's more of a likelihood in certain energies that you're going to experience quote unquote suffering, not to mention that you kind of disconnect yourself from God, which that means you disconnect yourself from love and joy. And then it just becomes like juicing adrenaline and like basically jerking off. Like there's more than one way to jerk off. It's not just playing with your little dick. Like that's just one chakra.
How dare you?
Yeah, there's you can jerk off your root chakra by people jump out of planes and adrenaline junkies and stuff like that, or you can juice the solar plexus and be like, I'm right, or being over competitive or over conflict oriented, which mostly comes to the pride thing. Like I'm right. Some people that you're like, why would somebody want to be right so bad that they stoop to certain levels? And it's because they're jerking off. But it's not like the sex chakra. It's the solar plexus chakra, but they're still getting an orgasm from it. They're getting a rush from it. And yeah, so it's like, just because you stop playing with your dick, that there's other ways you jerk off. So like every chakra can be jerked off, so to speak. But where was I going with it? Now I'm just talking about jerking off chakras, and I don't remember what the fuck I was talking about.
You're talking about determinism, I think.
Oh yeah, determinism. Yeah, I mean, for instance, everybody's heard of live by the gun, die by the gun, or live by the sword, die by the sword. Yeah, you're in a certain energy, you're contextualizing things in a certain way. You're going to bring that to you eventually. You run off for a long time, but sooner or later, God's going to cut you down, as the lyric goes. Like,
or kind of cash.
Yeah, like you don't have to part of the structure of this dream is that in certain energies, as the totality of everything's playing out, is that if you're a jerk off, you're eventually going to fall on your own sword. That's the whole natural law idea that they try to teach you in the occult, for example, like why Satanists study like the natural laws, is that so that they don't fall on their own sword. But if you're in a higher energy anyway, as James was kind of saying, it's more of like an order. I don't remember how to put it exactly, but basically there's like I'm not putting words in his mouth, but there's a more magnificent order. There's a less likelihood to suffering. I mean, part of humanness is because those negative energies are part of this realm. they're built into the fabric of this realm, that you're never going to avoid suffering completely in this realm, so to speak. But you can contextualize it to where you don't fall prey to these negative energies that once you take you over again are going to take you back on another ride that's eventually going to fall on your own sword again, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like, that's really what happened. Well, I'll put it this way. I like how Fortune de Saint Germain says on Crow, he's like, on Crow 777 show, if you guys aren't familiar with that, he says that we're here to learn lessons in this realm, and you can learn them through suffering or through joy. And I think that suffering really begins when, like they say in Buddhism, suffering begins when you want things to be other than they are. So the key to that is really just accepting things how they are, and then just looking at it in a different viewpoint or from a different way. And I know it sounds easy, but it's definitely not as easy as it sounds. But I think it can be attained, especially if you take a step back and if you really believe we are eternal. I believe we're energy and we're just in this realm. We're having an experience of the physical. I also think this realm is probably all there is. I mean, I know people talk about like the astral and the outside and all this stuff, but I think that it's still part of this realm. And it just depends on what state of energy you're in to how you experience it. And since we are in a state where we think it's a physical thing, we experience it as physical. We have the ability for, free will, I guess you could say. But I think there's also all these other energies around us and all these beings, you can call them if you want, that we just can't see, or maybe our brain doesn't allow us to see them. But if you look at it in that context, then there really is nothing that could be done to you that's going to permanently scar or hurt you. Like when you're growing up, they're like, we're going to put this on your permanent record. I
Mhm.
think that the only thing that does exist after you leave this realm are the things that you do,
Yeah.
like, and it's going to propel you to different energy, and you're just going to experience this realm differently once you leave this body. In that way, I think you don't really have to get like tied down. Like somebody in the chat said recently, a bunch of bad stuff happened to her, like her cat died and all this stuff. I think when people die and when terrible things happen that we suggest, we seem them as terrible things that happen to people, there's a way to look at it. And this could sound like new agey, and it could be dangerous too, because it also could lead people into non-action, and it could lead them into just being like, oh, the world's perfect, I don't have to do anything. And this is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you do your best. And then when things happen, you just have this understanding that, I'm not God myself. I didn't create this whole realm. Maybe I'm an aspect of the consciousness that is God or whatever, but I can't ever perceive what the plan of this is from my limited knowing. I only, right now in my current form, I'm a being that lives like 120 years or whatever. I can't even understand what eternity is. Like I have no perception. It's just like in Tolkien with the men and the elves, especially in the earlier stuff, like in the first or the second age or the first age or whenever the men came around. The men had a whole different way of doing things because they had such shorter lives, where elves were immortal. They would basically just live forever unless they were killed, like somebody killed them or whatever. But other than that, they would live forever. So they had this whole different idea and understanding of what it was. And they even looked at death as a gift. They would tell the men, like, you got this gift of death. You get to leave this realm. We're bound to this place. We're stuck here whether we like it or not. We just make the best of it. And I think that in that same way, you really can make the best of a situation. And when stuff happens to you, it's just like you got to look at it, or you don't have to. You can do what you want. But if you want to learn your lessons through joy, you look at it in a way of like, oh, this is just happening because it's all part of this plan or whatever. And I think one other key to that is like, people who think we're in a simulation or the demiurge or we're in some kind of soul trap or soul farm. I just see that really as victim consciousness, like to the nth degree. You're like, I'm just here and nothing I do matters because I'm just there's this demiurge and he's just sucking all our energy and stuff. And I that's just like a classic textbook way of being controlled or not controlled, of learning your lessons through suffering. And if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm not telling you can't do it. I think the key is to suffer until you're sick of it, and then you just find another way. And that's the beautiful thing about this experience and about this existence, is we have this mind that is capable. And I know, because I was on both spectrums. I was in the suffering, and I'm not saying I'm not suffering now in some ways, in some degrees, but my life right now, I could be suffering a lot more just because of the way I'm looking at what has happened to me or what's happening to me. Or I could focus on the positive stuff, excuse me, and learn my lessons through joy. And I also understand that that's not everybody's path. Some people, maybe it's because of their personality. This is something we could talk about too, because I've noticed that there's some people that I have friends that are like pessimistic, right? And they look at the glass half empty, whereas I'm somebody who looks at it half full. But maybe because of the way this realm works, and either past life or whatever it was, they incarnated into this realm and they have this point of view where it's where the glass is half empty. And that's how they have to go through. Maybe it's something they have to overcome, I'm not quite sure, but that brings us right into the 16 different personality types. And maybe that's something that is set before you incarnate into this realm, or just this physical existence. And that's what you have to deal with. It's like you're literally your cross to bear,
Yeah, it's a certain those are archetypes. There's nothing new under the sun. There's certain archetypes that play out according to natural law, so to speak. That's what that's about. That's what astrology is about. That's if you look into the mythologies, that's why I also really enjoy listening to Fortune on Crow. He's pretty much the only time I listen to Crow is if Fortune's on, because Fortune's just awesome. But
he's also going to listen when I'm on, guys. Don't worry.
If you're on, I'll listen.
I'm not saying I've been invited on. I'm just, manifesting. That's all. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like, mythology. There's like really nothing new under the sun. Like I was just saying with the iron filings and understanding certain entities you would call demons, or which are a different dimension. Like a demon, like I don't want to digress too much, but if you want to know what a demon is, there's a really cool guitarist online. Owen plays him every now and then. What's his name? Arturos, something like that. I'll share the link with Brandon. Maybe you could put it in the thing. But anyway, if you want to see what a demon is, this guy has a gift, because he'll look at something like these two like Karens arguing in a store or something like that, and he'll kind of put a music to it, and his music is like these like death metal kind of heavy guitar riffs. And what he's basically doing, if you're observing what he's doing, is it's kind of like, like when you go to the doctor and they shoot that dye through your blood so they can see you on certain scans or whatever. What he's basically doing is he's putting a musical tone, because music, in my opinion, is to certain dimensions, it's the closest that you're going to get. And he's putting like these death metal riffs to these two Karens, for example, arguing, and you can see clear as day that it's the same demon possessing both of these women or whoever, and it's making them argue with each other and feeding off of it, basically keeping them in its energy, so it can they become the iron filings in its field, because the demon is more on the level of like a field than the iron filings themselves. And it's the same way for like angels, or what you call angels, or the Holy Spirit, which is just the more holy energies all the way up the source, so to speak, is how I understand it. The animating spirit of love, so to speak, that comes in degree. That's why I like that David R. Hawkins model, because you can see it in number, and you can it's something your mind can wrap around, your logical mind can wrap around. But anyway, Brandon, help. Where was I going with this?
Well, first I love what you said, but I want to just say I passed out some wrenches in the chat, so you guys are welcome. And if you ever feel like you need to use them, just go ahead and use them. But we have somebody in the chat that seems like they're having a pretty bad time at it. They said something about demons. They crashed my entire life. Like literally every aspect of my life is now in ruins. The demons made that happen. They even brought death. And then Stacy Sunshine said, read the book of Job. You aren't dead. Maybe there's a bigger picture you're not seeing.
Yeah, join the club. It's part of being human. You just got to accept it and kind of, I don't know how to say it. You got to see it from a higher context and see that. So, so what? It's part of it's just part of life. I don't know how to put it other than that. I want to be cold. I guess I'm kind of cold in some ways, but like that's just
Well,
life, man.
yeah, and totally. Some people will take like the some of the Christian beliefs, right, where they believe after you die you can go to heaven, or there's the Garden of Eden where everything's perfect and it's all going to be great and we're all going to have butterflies and lollipops and everything. But when you think about it, at the end of the day, that's really kind of communism. It's like, I don't know. Is that really true? Do you think and some people want to do that with this world? And that's what gets back to what we were talking about, people doing the great work. They want world peace, right? But yeah, world peace after everybody gets killed and there can't be any wars, there's going to be a handful of people left that are going to experience peace, So I think that the key to it, and again, this is for me, everyone has their own life, but the key to it is to figure it out in this life. And really what I think the Garden of Eden or heaven or whatever it is, it's just really a mindset. It's a way to look at this realm as a magical place where you really can manifest the life that you want, or really just walk your dharma and do what you have to do. But sometimes there's a lot of bad things that are going to happen to you. And if you use the example of Job from the Bible, it's a really good one because you could see all these things. And I mean, it was written a long time ago, so maybe it wasn't exactly written, it's up to you how you interpret it. Maybe it wasn't written exactly to people's standards to understand today. But the way that I kind of comprehend it is to see that you're going to have waves and there's going to be certain cycles. And sometimes all these material things in front of you are going to go away that were making you happy. But then if you can find happiness despite all that stuff, then it's going to come back and it's going to be even better when you get it around the next time or whatever, because I really feel like it's just cycles. A lot of this stuff is just cycles.
Yeah. I mean, some of the people who've had the worst suffering have that's part of the thing in the 12-step program that we were talking about earlier. It's that they say you're not ready to take the first step until you hit rock bottom, that you suffered so much that you're like, the first step is to surrender to God or admit that you have a problem and then surrender to God. I don't remember the exact order, but it's until you've had enough suffering, like, okay, you can't blame the demons. It's like blaming a tiger for fucking like eating you. That's what it does. Like, who cares? Let them do what there's nothing you can do. You can't change that. All you can do is kind of change yourself. And if you look at things from a certain way, you'll stop being manifested in that kind of energy. Like, you have to suffer enough to where you want something better, or you'll never surrender to God and say, all right, I don't know what to do, and open yourself up to some sort of grace. Because ultimately, yeah, it is only God that can lift you up. That's the truth. Only God can give you grace to see you above it. I mean, Brandon knows I'm not exactly a Christian, but that is absolutely true. You don't have to like identify with a religion, so to speak. That's like a 12 steps. They're not affiliated with any particular religion. For instance, they encourage whatever you vibe with, but you have to surrender to God as you see God. That's how it's put. And yeah, I mean, suffering is the greatest gift. I would never trade any of the suffering in my life for anything, because it's been my greatest teacher, I guess.
Yeah.
And you really got to learn how to look at it like that, even when it's hard to look at it like that. But eventually you have to stop resisting it, stop blaming. Like, that's the thing. You don't blame the demons, don't blame the demiurge. It just does what it does. It's part of a certain script that's been going on for way longer than you can comprehend, or you and I can comprehend. It just is what it is. But the thing is, even if we are in a quote unquote prison, you still don't that's the irony, is you don't contextualize it like that. You just see, okay, things are the way they are, society is the way it is, people are the way they are, entities are the way they are. Like you just kind of like, oh, okay, it just is. You see it as just is.
Mm.
And yeah.
Like Fortune would say, it is what it is and infinitely more. And I'm going to give a shout out to Quentin Farrell, aka Hobbit Bear, who's in the chat. We did a great stream last week. Check that out. Also, Robo Honky, which is still my favorite handle. I freaking love that. It just reminds me of like Futurama. Slow mo moon buggies in there. What's going on? Some of our regular listeners or watchers or slaves, I like to call them, are in there. Thank you guys for being here and slaving it up for us. But no, I think, yeah, what you said is exactly right. But I'll just go on to even say that it's like, and I know you know this too, but it's like you don't have to do any of these things. You can continue in your suffering, and maybe there's a reason that you do it, because me, Joe, nobody in the chat is gonna be able to make you see it. You're gonna have to see it for yourself. So sometimes maybe you have to suffer some more in order to see it. And we've all gone through our share of suffering. I know some people in the chat too who I've talked to and done like readings for and stuff like that. We've all gone through suffering, a whole bunch of suffering. I mean, I know a friend of mine died in 2019. He left behind a 1-year-old daughter and a young wife, so it's like, that's just the part of this, the way this realm works. And I feel like it wouldn't work correctly if we didn't have that adversary. We wouldn't really have free will. We wouldn't have true free will in this realm unless there were consequences for our actions and suffering to be had, depending on how we looked at things that happened, So I just think that the sooner that a person accepts it, the sooner that they could get on the road to learning lessons through joy. I guess I could say it is like the best way that I could put it,
Yeah, eventually you'll suffer so much that you'll let go, and then you'll actually experience God. That's happened to many, many people, that they suffered so much that when they finally let go, like it was all at once, like the call it the Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it. And then once it's there, like that's your goal. That's you just want to go back.
Yeah.
David R. Hawkins used to call it based off that movie Shangri-La, or whatever they called that movie, where you just want it, once Shangri-La exists, that's all you want to do is get back there. And I could tell you that's a fact, man.
Yeah, exactly. And that could also be like another trap that happens too, because depending on your point of view. But no, I love the idea of, and that's one thing that I really like about you, Joe, is that your whole mission in life, I guess I could say, you realized your dharma is to just elevate your consciousness, and everything else is kind of like fun, and you look into it and you do this, but you realize that what your mission that you believe that you're on is to basically just get as high in the consciousness range as you can while you're here, and you kind of set up your life around that. And I think it's great, because a lot of people will chase like material wealth or status, or they chase all these things, but I feel like at the end of the day, they're just, in an inverted way, they're just chasing that raise in consciousness. They just don't know what it is. They just feel like if they do that next drug or have sex with that next person or whatever it is, they get a little bit of, I guess, ecstasy or bliss, but it's so fleeting. And because it's material, it really doesn't lead you anywhere. It's like a trick of this realm, But I mean, it's
Well,
beautiful. But go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, everything you just said, sex, or if you actually listen to like the lyrics of like the Nine Inch Nails songs, "Closer to God," like if you how do I explain this? Basically,
I want to fuck
yeah,
you like an
yeah.
animal.
Well,
Yeah.
basically, those things that you're describing, drugs is a great example. Going back to the 12-step thing we were talking about, is the reason you get high, the reason you feel good when you do these things is you're more or less experiencing what I was just talking about, that Shangri-La, but in smaller doses. And it's through a permission slip, a physical way. But when you have an orgasm, or you get high, or you get drunk, or jump off out of an airplane, or whatever the fuck you do, like that joy you're experiencing is God, but you're only allowing it to happen through physicality. I don't know how to put it other than that. But basically what they found in the 12-step thing is that was the only way that alcoholics, for instance, ever got sober in human history. There's like a whole story behind it. Like the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous was used to go to Carl Jung back when Carl Jung was doing his thing for for psychotherapy or whatever you call it, counseling therapy. And he would get clean for a little while, but then relapse and get clean for a little while and relapse. And then eventually he went to Carl Jung. He's like, can I ever be cured of this? Like I keep getting better and then I fall back into it. And this keeps going on. And Carl Jung was like, you know what? You want to know the truth is that psychiatry has never cured. We don't know how to cure alcoholism. What I can tell you from all my reading is that there are many case studies throughout history of like people who join like monkhoods, etc., that when they joined these orders and gave their life over to God, they got clean. And that is, we only have case studies, but we don't know how to replicate that through like psychology or psychiatry or whatever. So the guy took that principle and he applied it, and then eventually there was another guy involved. There's a whole history where they came up with 12 steps basically as a kind of a working model to help people get clean. And the whole idea behind the 12-step thing is to basically surrender to God and seek God through prayer and meditation, and to purge yourself of like guilt, especially like and because guilt is the biggest thing. That's another thing. That's why you kind of have to understand the deterministic elements of humanity or of consciousness, to be better put, is that you can't like beat yourself up because if a certain energy field is a part of you, because you've over eons have built up this quote unquote karma through your actions, and it keeps playing out. Like guilt is one of the worst things that you can hold on to, because eventually if you slip up again, then you're like, oh, I'm a piece of shit, fuck it, and then you quit smoking meth again or whatever the fuck you do, or you back to the sauce, and so basically it's to get you clean and keep you clean. That's the whole idea behind it. And but you have to want it as well. And that's why they say you have to hit rock bottom. We can't, like a judge can't force you, like odds of that working are like none, because you have to make a free will kind of choice to go through this. And you can apply this not just to alcohol or drugs or sex or gambling, there's all kinds of anonymous things. You can apply that to like anger or pride, or any little thing that you notice that you're missing the mark, and you can apply the 12 steps, not necessarily have to go through it step by step like that, like very linear, but just do it all kind of at once of an overall context, which is basically more or less the Lord.
Yeah. 100%. You still there? Uh-oh, I think we might have lost Joe. That's all right. He'll come back if we did. Shout out to the chat. We got Stacy Sunshine out there. She said the root issue with the 12-step plan is that it makes you always remember that you are still and always will be an addict. That's crap. Yeah. I don't think it's a perfect system. I think like Ram Dass had said, every method is a trap. I think there's nothing that man makes is quote unquote perfect, unless it's all perfect, in which case then everything's perfect. But I think that there's certain aspects of anything that's man-made that could be a grabble, especially as people start to worship certain things and they think that's the only way. I hear you. Let me see if I could check the old Telegram and see if he's sending me a message. He's all the way in Germany, folks. So how crazy is that we're able to have this conversation and with modern technology? It's amazing. Now I'm just rambling, but anyway, does that chat have anything else they'd like to talk about? I could also say that we have a couple very interesting episodes coming up in the Oversharon show, so stay tuned. We talked to Chance Garton yesterday. That's going to be coming up in a couple weeks. We talked to Davin again from Navid Astrology. We've had him on and he was awesome. People loved him. So keep your eyes open for that. And I also have a couple of guests lined up that I'm really excited about myself, even for next week. I believe I'm going to have my friend Pat Oates on, who's a comedian. Are you there, Joe?
Brandon, do you got me?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, my sound card like shut off on my computer. I just restarted it and now I'm back, I guess.
Oh yeah, no problem. I figured you'd be back. I was just giving some promo to stuff that's coming up. Now we have some people in the chat that were took an issue with the 12 step. You probably heard me, right? What I was saying or no?
No, I mean, I was talking on and on and on and on, and then I realized at some point, oh shit, I don't hear Brandon anymore because I went
He's not there anymore.
I'm like, fuck, what's going on?
So one person said the root issue with 12-step plan is that it makes you always remember that you are still and always will be an addict. That's crap. And what I said was, any system made by man isn't going to be perfect. There's going to be certain things. And then also you have to remember that there's an idea that's created by one person, and then other people later take it on and give different representations. And then there's other motivations behind it. They have to get funding, and then things change and all this stuff. But I think what we're saying, I'll let you speak for yourself, but it's more of the idea of what they were trying to accomplish and at its pure essence. And that's what could work for people.
Remember at the beginning, we were talking about you got to have humility. Well, the reason you have to do that is one, that it's a group meeting where there's people of all levels of being clean, not from somebody who's has been sober for 3 hours to somebody who's been sober 30 years, various levels of consciousness within it. So it's kind of like one, it's like a bonding thing. Two, it's to have humility that if you do drink, you are going to act like the same cocksucker that you acted like before you. So it's like, it's a humility that you have a problem and that you can never drink, for instance, well, whatever your problem is. But basically it's not, you don't even forget about the 12 steps. I never went through 12 steps. I'm just trying to explain how some of these concepts I was explaining work, and the 12 steps is a good example. But like you could just take the overall context of that. Like, for instance, like, well, the things that Carl Jung was talking about where somebody joined like a monkhood, they didn't go through 12 steps, but the overall context, overall concept that's behind it is what they did, and that's what they discovered, and then they built the thing like the 12 steps.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something I was talking about when he got disconnected. Ram Dass says, like, basically every method is a trap. And it's funny, we were just talking to Chance Garton, and that's going to be on Oversharing in a couple weeks. And when I said that, he was talking, then he started talking about Ram Dass, how he was like new age and all this stuff. And I was like, no, I understand all that too. It's like, you can't put somebody on a pedestal, but just because they might be part of a movement or whatever doesn't mean that they aren't speaking some truth at some point, So any method, it really, what it comes down to is somebody has to want to stop at their core. They kind of have to do it until they're done. So if somebody didn't have success with the 12-step program or whatever program it was, maybe they just weren't ready to be done with it yet,
It's not easy. And, the biggest reason because I've known people who went through Narcotics Anonymous many times in my life, even personal family members and stuff like that. One of the biggest reasons people relapse because they built up so much bad karma, like that some people just can't forgive them. First and foremost, like, not everybody, just because you ask for somebody's forgiveness doesn't mean they're going to forgive you. And no positionality on that one, because people have done some horrible things. But there's that, as well as the biggest thing I've noticed, that when people get clean and they go through those programs, is they're trying to do better, and then the people around them who are part of that energy field, they are part of those iron filings that when they were an addict, for instance, begin to be like around them. Oh, that guy, he's so fucking fake. I saw that guy fucking suck a dick for a crack rock or whatever the fuck it is. Like, they're really nasty and condescending, and like, these people are trying to get clean, and the people around them who are part of that negative energy field, get really talk a lot of shit, and then the person feels bad again, gets back into those negative energy fields, and the next thing they know, they're smoking crack or meth or whatever again, because they went back into that negative energy. Because it is the whole point I was getting at is not necessarily the 12 steps, that is more of the iron filings in the magnetic field kind of thing, and the higher energies will arrange it to a more like how James put it. I wish I could remember how he put it, but it's, you know what I mean. It's more
Dysfunction,
orderly.
is that what he said? Dysfunction or something like that? Where's Grounded Extracts when you need him? Maybe we could summon him by just keep saying his name. Maybe he'll just show up in here.
Yeah, but like anybody who's went through those programs, I've also noticed that, like, usually you would think that when you were the alcoholic, you would have lost your wife, for instance, right? But actually, it turns out that most of the time, like, once the person got clean, they wound up getting a divorce, because it turned out that person was a part of that overall energy field of them being an alcoholic. Like, there's a whole like structure arranged to that energy, and then like that person no longer is getting what they needed from that person once that person's clean. Like, and it sounds crazy, but that's kind of how it works sometimes. When well, I think everybody in this community can see that once you kind of rose your energy a little bit, you lost a lot of friends, right? Like, a lot of people were repelled. Maybe you didn't, not necessarily like a dramatic falling out, but it's just like you didn't vibe anymore, and you fell out of contact. Like, it's very dramatic when you're extremely low energy and then you go to a higher energy. Like, everything around you completely rearranges. Like, you don't have the same friends anymore. You lose more family when you get clean sometimes than when you're actually doing what you were doing. And it's a very interesting thing to look into.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because that kind of happened to me too, but it was more of I just didn't want to be around certain people anymore. And it's nuts. And it's so funny. Like you said that though, when you get clean, then you get divorced, it's like, yeah, because it was like a codependent thing,
Yeah.
That's what Shannon in the chat said. And shout out to NH Guy who's in the chat. What's up, man? Thanks for coming by. Let's see who else just joined that I wanted to shout out. I think that's it for now. But that's the thing, because I think when people hear you talking about something like the 12 step, they think that maybe you're a spokesperson for it or something. It's like, no, you're just talking about what you've seen in the results from it and stuff, and it might have worked for a bunch of people, but nothing is going to work for everybody.
No.
It's really up to that person, and maybe it's just their karma to be either an alcoholic or a junkie or whatever it is until they exit this realm. And then afterwards, when their energy or however it is, maybe they can learn some other lessons, and then they come back and they just have a different life or whatever,
Yeah,
Paraplegic says, I wanted to do the 12-step program. I couldn't because they didn't have any ramps, just steps. So I called the 80. Registered a complaint for the AA and NA being racist.
that was a good one.
Shout out to Paraplegic. Yeah, I wouldn't want you in there anyway. Jesus. Oh, Jesus, trying to sell your coffee. You would probably kill it at the 12-step or like AA with all your coffee. They'd be like, yeah, when's this guy getting here with his coffee? That's hilarious. Yeah, and another thing I guess we could talk about, because we're on the topic of like methods and all that stuff and traps and all that, is like astrology, tarot, Kabbalah, all these different tools that are out there that people use or misuse or whatever it is. Because I know you have some very interesting beliefs on that. And it's funny because I have a podcast, or I did a podcast about the tarot for a long time, called the Tarot Bowl Podcast. You could still get that. It's still up at tarotbowl.com, TAROTBULL.com. Go check that out. Me and my friend Ashley, we covered like every card in the tarot. We had a really good time. We just have really opposite schedules right now, but I'm sure we'll start to get to recording something one of these days. But you bring up something about the tarot, because so you have two usually point of views. You have people that say, oh, it's evil and it's the devil and you shouldn't mess with it. And other people are like, no, man, it's great. I love the tarot. It's like the best thing ever. And your point of view is a little different, which I admire you for, because you don't see too many unique point of views out there these days about that stuff. But what do you think about all that? And what have you found? I'll just say, through your knowing and your experience, what have you come to believe?
On tarot and specifically.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about that. Even astrology a little bit to some degree.
Yeah, I guess it's basically the same thing, but we'll just use tarot for the example.
Yeah, good idea.
No, tarot cards are neutral. It's totally a neutral. I want to call it instrument, but like, I guess, yeah, an instrument. Um, well, like on the tarot is, you study the tarot because each tarot card has, so much symbolism in it that it tunes you to a certain more non-linear idea. So you learn all this symbolism on each card. So when you lay out a card, and more so a series of cards, you're tuning yourself to certain archetypes, and it's kind of like how astrology, the whole zodiac is in your natal chart. It's like all those cards are part of your consciousness, like part of the human experience. They're all a part of it, all the symbol. So you're laying out certain things and you're looking at certain, call it occult, literally hidden occult kind of things in the metaphysical kind of realm, certain non-linear kind of things that's where the, like, say you say somebody's psychic, for instance, that's the level they're operating on. Like tarot cards are a way to hack the matrix to be psychic, so to speak. So you're kind of looking at these hidden nonlinear kind of things that are apart, and especially as you start laying out cards and seeing the connections, because it doesn't matter what cards you lay out, you're going to see your mind's going to be tuned to it, and you're going to see certain connections and to get kind of an insight, like from the psychic level. The problem with that is not the tarot in and of itself. The problem is you. Like, the problem is you and your little ego.
How dare you? No, I'm just
kidding. The problem is that you're going to start being dependent upon these cards, which immediately sends you into a different contextualization, which immediately sends you into a different spiritual energy, which immediately sends you into quote unquote negative stuff. Usually pride always goes before the fall, as they say. And you start whatever you lay the cards out, whatever energy that is your contextualization will be the coordinating energy. Like, back to I'll always go on and on about the magnetic field and the iron filings, because this is literally how consciousness works. It's a metaphor, yes, but it's quite literal. Say you're in this energy of pride, that energy and whatever kind of quote unquote entity that may exist in there will be coordinating where you're reading this psychic information from. And it's way above your head, and basically you're playing with fire. And it's the same thing with astrology and numerology and Kabbalah. Kabbalah is like the ultimate kind of way to tap into this stuff, because as you saw, like Michael Tessarian's work, for instance, everything is in the Kabbalah, like tarot, astrology, numerology, and beyond. So you can, like, you tap into this psychic kind of level, but you don't have the consciousness for it yet. For one, you're playing with fire. And the thing, like, which is taught in certain occult things, even like Rosicrucianism, is that, or even like just straight up Christianity, where they say don't mess with these kind of things, is because, like, once you're of a certain level of vibration and your consciousness expands, all those occult kind of things and quote unquote psychic powers come to you anyway. Like, you didn't need to hack it, you didn't need to cheat. Like, the occult is like a way to hack. So it's a way to get more advanced before you're ready, I guess is what I'm saying, because certain levels of consciousness are not meant to have certain information that could be quite detrimental to your own development.
Yeah, 100%. That reminds me of what you said about when you first started to get into occultism, when you were studying and looking into it and practicing. They wanted you, or it was said that you should get an alter ego, some kind of alter ego that is capable of performing magic or whatever. It's like you're building a persona or another a false self, or if you will.
Yeah, certain schools of thought have you do that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And what I would add is, again, I I think that what you're saying is spot on, because it really has to do with attachment, right? Because if you get attached to any of these methods, and especially if before you're ready, you're starting to see things, you don't know what energy is arranging these iron filings to show you what you're supposed to see. And then another thing is too, you have this like trickster element that comes in, and you'll basically hear what you want to hear. You'll see what you want to see out of it. And then you're going to just be pushed in all these other different ways and directions. And I think, like what you said, if you get to the certain point of understanding, you'll realize that these symbols that are in the tarot, they're just everywhere. It's just what consciousness and life is all about. You can go out into nature and find the symbolism and stuff and take it at your own pace and then be ready for it. And this is somebody who, like, I'll do tarot readings for friends and people and stuff like that, you know? So it's not like I'm demonizing it. It is just a tool. But I think that the problem comes in when you start like depending on it, and you start to worship it in a way, or you look at it as it's the ultimate answer, when I feel like these tools are better used for, I guess you could say, healing yourself or working on yourself. I use them in maybe that capacity, but there is a point where you might not even need, or you probably don't even need any of these tools, you know, but that's why I'm always careful with any kind of tool that I use. You know, I'm saying, why am I using this? What's this all about? And all that stuff. But yeah, you're somebody who definitely opened my mind to that, because I was always like, oh yeah, this stuff is great. It's perfect. You know, it's the answer for everything. Well, I didn't really look at it like that way, I guess, but people certainly can get into that point of view, you know. And the other thing about the tarot too is, if you go to other people for tarot readings, sometimes they could, and they might not even realize they're doing this. They could just be animated by a certain frequency that is having them doing this, but the person gets dependent on that tarot reader. And I know so many people that are like that. They're like, oh, I went to a psychic and they said this. Like a friend of mine recently, a photographer that I work with, she was like, oh, I went, you know, I gave her a reading before. She's like, oh, I was up at the fair, you know, this big fair, and I went to see a psychic, and she told me the same thing that this tarot reader told me, and this told me this and that. And I was just thinking to myself, like, that's great that you did that, but you don't need that. There's ways you could see it in your own life and progress because of it. You know, I think it's just that it's so obvious. That's why they could see it. It's just not obvious to you because you're not open to that yet. You're on a different frequency, or you're just distracting yourself with other aspects of your life, you know?
You're too close. That's the problem. You're too close. You don't see it because the shoe fits. Like, if you step back a little, expand the context a little, it's you start getting a little intuitions about it at first, and then you're like, wait a minute. And then once you see like the bigger picture about how consciousness works, period, then you're like, oh, like, now I get it. But I'm not against like studying like tarot or Kabbalah or any of these things to an extent, because by studying these things, you're opening your consciousness that these things are real, which can lead you to the next step to expand to the next context and expand out. So in that sense, I don't find it bad. Like, I don't think tarot is evil. It's like I said, the tarot cards are neutral. The tarot is neutral. It's you that's going to be fucking yourself in the end. It's not going to be the tarot. You're going to do it to yourself. So
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Caribe Root, shout out to her. She's in the chat. She said, I can't keep up with this crew. Yeah, I know. We're awesome. I'm telling you what. And then Shannon says, it seems like no matter what the method is, you have every path, every answer, every ability or wisdom within you. No tools are necessary, and not everyone has context or discernment. Yeah, that's 100%. I find truth is only truth if you attach or believe any of it. Wow, she should be on the show right now.
yeah, insightful.
Shannon, listen, I'm going to call you out. What are you doing? Come on, you got to start sharing the knowledge that you have. Now you don't have to, but no, it's great. I'm glad that you're a fellow listener and sharer, and you contribute to our chat. It's really great to have you guys in there. Yeah, we have we have an oversharing group in Telegram, and it's a really awesome spot. We have a lot of cool people in there, and I was really busy this weekend, and I came and checked it, and there was like 100 or 200 messages in there, and I'm like, oh my god, I was going through it. I'm like, this is like gravy. And it's really amazing that when I started out doing all this stuff, I always thought I was alone because of my worldview. And as I started to see more people were into this stuff, it's really awesome when we get together. And then because of that, then other ideas are bounced off. And then, and of course we bust each other's balls, which is great. And I think that's a big part of it too. It's like, you got to be able to take that ball busting. But back to what Shannon said, I think exactly what you said is right. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with using these tools. They're just neutral, but it just depends on your point of view and your frame of reference. And because of that, you're going to get different stuff out of it. And it could just lead you down other pathways to get lost,
I mean, my problem is exactly like I said to you in the first oversharing that we did, is that every occultist I've ever come across rose. They're a rising star. They gained a very high level of consciousness, and then suddenly the energy was sucked out of the fucking room, and now they're like this. You could tell it's not the same entity anymore, even though it's got a lot of its old structural knowledge. Now it's like bones in the soil, like the ideas that go through the consciousness, is that they structurally know these things now, but no, now they're not connected to that spirit anymore. And I've seen it over and over and over again. And I've heard many people talk about this, the saints, and as well as people like Hawkins and shit like that. Like is it going to happen to everyone? Like, I don't know, maybe not in this lifetime necessarily, but I've seen everybody I've ever learned with or learned from, they're a rising star, and eventually they just fell. And they still have pretty words. They still have the structural kind of thoughts forms that came with that consciousness. But like I said, it's the difference between like a living organism and a fossil now. It's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I love that. It's like they got all the energy sucked out of them, It's like, who sucked that, or what sucked the energy out? And that brings us back to the they. Is there a grand conspiracy behind everything that orchestrated events and pranks like 7-Eleven, like the Handy Sook and all these different things that happen? Like, is it these wars, like people say World War I and World War II, it was all done by the bankers and stuff? And that could be true on some level, but was it just that all this stuff is profitable, so it was like a chain of events that led to that? And if so, is it because all these people were in this state of mind where they were vibrating on a certain level, so the iron filings arranged in a certain way, that all these things came together and then it happened that way? So in that way, you could kind of say it's a conspiracy, but I don't think all these things that happen in the way that they happen are due to just people making plans. I think that's kind of giving people way too much credit. Like, look at 2020, for example. I could see how that could happen. Somebody could come up with that plan, but I don't think it could be put into action the way it was, where like I wake up one day and everybody's covering their face. How many people would have to be in on it to get everybody to cover their face at certain levels? So we could see that, like the normies or whatever, the people around us that watch the news, we could see that it was their fear, or we could see that whatever it was is what caused them to do it, to just go along with it. But as above, so below, right? Can't we also then maybe extrapolate that it's even the grand conspiracy level of it? It's kind of some animating force, some kind of vibration that's causing all this to happen, and even the behaviors. Because I think the people at the top, they're really just trying to hold on to their power at the end of the day, because they've gained this level of power, they think, over people, or influence or whatever. And if there's something behind that driving it, I think that would make more sense.
Yeah, they're literally the Illuminati. They are literally because their contextualization comes out of the Luciferic pride. Like, it's coming out of I've been gifted with this consciousness, and this consciousness I've worked up to have, and it is my duty to guide humanity into the utopia. Like, it is my duty to lead the sheep, so to speak. That so it very I find the Illuminati as a very fitting title. I know people like to be cutesy with it and be like, "We are actually the Illuminati," and yeah, I get what they mean, but it's like, come on, man. There is two different kinds of enlightenment going on here. Like there's that Luciferic prideful energy that's I am the all knowing, all powerful. It's like in the Watchmen is like the greatest example of where the what's his name, the smartest man alive, where he cooks up this big fucking plot to bring humanity into a world with no wars because we're on the edge of nuclear war or whatever. And he's the smartest man in the world. He has like, I don't know, like a 500 IQ or whatever. And he cooks up this big thing and he plays all the systems and he's the richest man in the world as well. That's a great story to understand the Luciferic pride. Well, there's a lot of people that have come into various incarnations in this realm that are trying to do just what I just described. And it's become very obvious. That's what Bill Cooper was always beating the drum to. Like, hey, look, they're trying to fucking create a utopia. They're doing it right in front of your eyes. Like, hello, like, and it's not any one group, but a lot of these people part of the overall structure of them. You still got me?
Yep, still here.
All right. So the part of the overall structure is they join things like secret societies or certain fraternal orders like Freemasonry, or like, I don't believe there is a Freemasonic conspiracy, but I think Freemasons are involved in many conspiracies because the way the lodge system is set up and designed, way above the head of the Freemason himself, like that a lot of these like groups like the Royals are all part of Freemasonry. Like the Queen's cousin is the Grand Master of the London Lodge in the Square Mile of London. He's the master of all Freemasonry, for instance. And there's many people a part of that, but there's not just that. There's all kinds of groups. We've all heard the groups, like as Matt from Quantum says, the lineup: the Jesuits, is the Masons, is the Jesuits, is the Rosicrucians, is it the bankers, is it the Jews, is what is it like? And it's all true. There are many conspiracies and many, but ultimately is not these people that are organizing this. There is the overall energy, that Luciferic energy I just described, is organizing all this. They are the iron filings, and they have been incarnated into certain positions in this lifetime to have a certain level of power and authority over certain areas and certain infrastructures and institutions and et cetera, like the most highly concentrated you'll find Freemasons, and at least in the States and London and is England and the States, is in the criminal justice system, cops, judges, wardens, prison wardens, and in the military, your officer class in the Navy, in the Marines, in the Army. Every officer above captain that I knew in the Army was a Freemason, every single one of them. And as far as I could tell, I don't know if there's anybody who reaches levels like general out joining something like that, but it doesn't mean that the Masons are doing it. It's part of this overall structure of this system, of this organizing consciousness that is doing it. And just like you were explaining with the 2020, where everybody, okay, time to put on the mask. It's literally like how the queen bee sends out the vibration to the worker bees to gather the honey and build the hive.
100%. Yeah, that's a great analogy. That is crazy because that's exactly how it's done, right? It's just a frequency that's put out. And what if getting into Freemasonry opens you up, like what you have to go through in Freemasonry is what opens you up to being susceptible to the energy, right? It gets you on that frequency. What if these steps were made by somebody who was actually animated by this frequency?
100%. Bingo. That's exactly what it is, as far as I could tell, at least.
So it's like a working model to turn you into a bee that then listens to the queen bee,
each degree is its own vibration, and each time you are initiated into a vibration, it seems to me that you become open to a new level of consciousness, that now you, when you look at these Freemasonic board, like artwork and boards, and read this literature and stuff, you all of a sudden extract a new meaning, a new level of reality beyond your level of the last degree. And you're also a part of a fraternal order where the biggest Masonic secrets are not necessarily even the occultism, because that comes from the inside out. That becomes from being initiated into the degree, doing these rites and whatnot. It's the biggest Masonic secrets is what their fellow brothers are up to. Like, you can't rat on a fellow brother. Like, if he did something towards the great work, you have to shut your mouth. So if you see something, you're part of an Apollo space program, for instance, and you learn that some of your brothers are doing a certain thing, you have to shut your fucking mouth now, because you took the oath that comes with a consequence. It's a lot of these secret societies, that's what they do. It's like, okay, if you break the oath, you're going to have a spiritual consequence, like kind of a contract. It's the same thing like in the mafia, when they get initiated into the mafia and they cut their hand open and put the card in it forever, your soul burns, whatever, if you betray your oath. Like, it's the same thing with the say the Freemasons or any of these occult groups.
Yeah, 100%. And oh, well, Prometheus Peanut said the bee is their symbol. Napoleon rocked the bee symbol. Fascists, oops, my cursor's over the thing. Corona triumphalis, laurel leaf of control. Yeah, and
Yep.
it's really mind control, but is it like people doing it? And I tend to think it could be like a Sith situation, right? Where maybe all this stuff is done in this realm. Maybe there's like one person and it might even be a woman, right? And then there's like a master and then an apprentice. And I feel like this all falls in, if you're familiar with the law of one, anyone that's listening to this, where they say that there's certain ways you could get to the next level of consciousness. It's either through like the negative path or the positive path. We just use those two terms. And the negative path, you have to be like 95% negative to move up to the next level of consciousness. And that doesn't sound like it's very easy. And it doesn't sound like a lot of people are going to do it. So it could be one person that's actually behind all this, but they're not even really controlling it themselves. They're just getting other people to vibrate on this frequency, on this thing. So then the consciousness of the person that was before that now moved up to this next level of consciousness could, affect and control, just like puppets on a string. You see the marionettes and everyone's like, oh, they're just puppets. Trunk is just a puppet, but who is he a puppet to? Is it a they and a them and a group of people, or is it actually a non-human entity? It's just consciousness, and
Right.
he's just an iron filing, going along.
Yes, at some level, the iron filing, the magnetic field becomes the iron filing, but it's on a level that's beyond us. That's basically because everything's fractal in this universe. I could feel it intuitively, but I'll never be able to wrap my mind around it. But it's at least not that my human mind. It's 40 signals is not enough to figure this shit out.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think that's part of it. And that's when I talk about realm earth, because people talk about, are we on a spinning ball? Are we on a flat physical plane with a dome? Is it a simulation? And I'd say it's a spiritual realm. And the reason I say that is because everything else that I just mentioned is, at the end of the day, materialism. And the spiritual realm that we're in, I don't think we're supposed to ever figure out exactly what it is or how it works, because if we figure it out exactly, we might lose our free will, which is our gift while we're in this physical incarnation or manifestation, or however you want to say it. We're here to learn lessons, and we won't be able to learn the lessons if we knew it all. We would just be back to being a god or whatever. If we could understand all this, we would truly be a god, and we wouldn't need this training or whatever. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe we have to go through these things. Maybe we have to make all the wrong decisions until we want to turn our life around, in order to get to that next level of whatever this is. And maybe it's something that just keeps going on for eternity. We never know. But I think that the law of one, they're kind of onto something there. I don't ever try to fall into just one belief system. That is a channeled work. And I talked recently about channeled work, and or I wrote about this actually. I'm writing about this in my new book. Look for that sometime soon, hopefully. Where anything that's channeled, I feel like it comes through from the channeler's point of view. So if I'm the one who's channeling something, for say, by the way, and I believe we live like on a spinning ball, all the information I get is going to have to do with that. And those are the references I'm going to make. And I'm going to make all these different references in that way. But if I have a different point of view, I'm going to do it this way. So it doesn't mean all the stuff that I'm saying is wrong and can't be used. There's still truth in there that you can mine through and use it kind of like allegorically. And that's what I do with the law of one and all that stuff, to try to get a better idea of where I am. But again, I'm not supposed to understand it anyway, but it just helps me a little bit. And it really helps. All this stuff we're talking about at the end of the day helps get somebody out of a victim mindset, because there really is nobody to kind of point the finger at. There's nobody you can go kick out of a castle and then your life is going to be great.
Yeah.
Because even if you do kick that person out of the castle, someone's just going to come replace them. And it might even be you. You might have great intentions. Look at the show, The Wire, that the guy that was running for mayor, right? He was the guy that played Littlefinger in Lord of the Rings too, and in Game of Thrones, Littlefinger. That same actor, he plays a mayor, or a guy running for mayor, and then he becomes mayor. And he's like this really nice guy. He's really going to help everybody. But once he gets to that next level, it's all about just becoming governor. And it's not like he was a scumbag. It just took control of him, basically. There's really nothing he could do. He thought he could fix everything, and that's what happens. It's kind of like people say you want to change an institution, so you get involved in this institution to change it, and then eventually that institution changes you.
Yeah, totally. Because the institution's made up of a certain energy. Like every uh, institution you could think of has a certain spiritual energy, has a certain context of various degrees, various levels. Um, and when you become a part of that institution, you take on part of that energy. And when you take on certain lead positions, you take on a certain lead energy of the what you call the point of the pyramid, so to speak.
Exactly. And Prometheus Peanut says, I'm going to buy that book for sure, Brandon. Pumped I found your channel. Well, I'm glad you found us too, Prometheus. I'm happy every time we find somebody that resonates with what we're talking about here, because we're just we're sharing basically everything that we've learned through our life experiences. And Joe is somebody who I love to talk to, because not only is he an interesting person, but he's gone down a lot of these roads. He studied occultism, he manifested things in his own life, and he just found that it wasn't enough. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, how you manifested certain things and then what you found after that.
Yeah, it's it's not what you're looking for. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Like that was the kind of the theme that came up each time it worked. But it's very amazing when it works as well. Like everybody's, I think in this community at least, has experienced synchronicity, because you're open to it and you see it. That's part of consciousness. And magic is basically learning how to occult magic is to hack the matrix, kind of like how we were talking about tarot, but in the art of kind of manifestation. And it is I don't remember how Crowley put it, but basically changing consciousness to will. So basically you're changing your overall context, your overall structure. You're controlling the context, you're controlling the magnetic field, and then you're structuring certain iron filings into a certain pattern that it can form in certain fields. And then the next thing you know, you do the ritual to do this, and then the astral starts taking on the physical realm, and you start through synchronicity, something manifest. But the thing is, you're always manifesting anyway. That's just a way to hack it. It's another thing. You're getting things you're not supposed to have yet, because you're forcing your consciousness instead of letting it to unfold. Like it's the left hand path, so to speak. You're forcing shit. Like you're not supposed to have a certain understanding, a certain consciousness until you've earned it. And instead, occult magic hacks the matrix, hacks it, hacks consciousness, and changes it by your ego's will, and then things manifest. And the biggest thing, at least for me, it was like, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Like, it's just okay. It's like it's like when you buy, like, I plan on buying a new pair of speakers. I'm excited. I'm going to buy these speakers so I can finally mix my music a little better. And I'm going to get them, and I'm going to be all like excited to have them for a few days, and then that's going to pass. I mean, they're going to be useful tools in my craft, but it's yeah. I mean, we've all experienced that, where you're so excited to get something, and then it kind of loses its like. And then, but with occult magic, now you're just fucking with your consciousness. You're forcing it into this pattern and that pattern and this pattern and that pattern, and you're on and on and on. And and not noticing that your context, your level of consciousness is gradually falling. You spent all this work to raise it so you can manifest things quicker, and then to your lack of knowledge, it starts falling. Or you get really prideful about it and be like, "Oh, I'm this all powerful fucking sorcerer. Look what I could do." It's like, you're not that special, dude. Everybody can do that. Like, it's
Yeah. Yeah, it's just another ego trap, I guess. And you're kind of saying that, the way I see it is, you're kind of saying that you're better than God, because you know what should come and what should happen and what should happen for you. And especially when you're trying to manifest things for other people. And I think you've said this too. It's like you think you know better than God what they should have.
yeah, that's like the ultimate. It's bad enough when you do it to yourself, but when you try to do it for other people. But then again, it's like you can't do that anyway. That's kind of a illusion of your own ego, that you think you can force somebody anyway. You can't do quote unquote black magic, like we talked about in the last over Sharon, which is basically what rhetoric is. Like, rhetoric is you want to understand rhetoric. They have all these fancy fucking things they teach you, but the bottom line of what rhetoric is you're changing somebody's context and then shaping the logical sequences with words to shape a pattern within a certain context, and so that person is persuaded to your way of thinking. Black magic takes it further to bring about quote unquote manifestation, but or bring about results, like whatever that happens to be, whatever your trip is. But basically, yeah, rhetoric is very similar to black magic. Not to say that rhetoric is necessarily bad. The problem is when you think it as justified a means, because you think you know better, and then you start manipulating people with rhetoric and fucking with their consciousness, and then turning them into, like, I don't know what's the word, zombies in my view. I mean, that's not the right word, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, kind of like the worker bee thing, like a drone bee, like you were saying, you're kind of puppeting people to dance to the rhythm of your beat because you think that you can fix it all, or everything is,
Yeah,
you
you
know
have
the
the answer.
answer.
Yeah, you have all the answers. Like, and things are very complex. I mean, there's certain universal fucking truths that you see. Like, there are certain things that you call sins that cause chaos and suffering, and things that higher levels of consciousness that bring harmony and peace and can cultivate growth and stuff like that. So there are certain, and the cultists always want to say natural law, but I don't really like natural law, because you'd be doing, if you're on a certain level vibration, you do the right thing anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be taught. It's just something that's within us. Paraplegic Bear says, manifest me a new spine and femoral heads. Why do people always do everything but heal paralyzed motherfuckers? I'd love to, I don't know, I'd love to skateboard again, is what he said. But see, this is the thing, right? Paraplegic, I understand, but if we did manifest you a new spine and femoral heads, and you got to skateboard, you might skateboard right into a truck. You know what I mean? Like, it's not up to us. You gotta take issue with God. Maybe he'll give you one. You never know. I think if you believe it enough, it can happen. You just have to be, maybe you're just not ready for it. I don't know.
I mean, miracles happen, but there's certain structures of what we are. Like, our current vibration right now, me, Joe, you, Brandon, Paraplegic Bear, we have a certain vibration, a certain structure. And you can't change certain things. Like, I'm not going to grow taller, I'm not going to be like as athletic as I was when I was 20. Like, there's certain things that it's just not going to happen. Like, I'm not going to walk through walls. Like, it's you manifest within the realm of potentiality. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, at a certain level, the way this realm works, it might be possible to do those things if you have enough belief, but it's one of those things like a city, like a power or whatever. Because I feel like if you get to that level of consciousness to be able to do that, most times you're going to realize that that doesn't matter anyway. So it's not even worth doing any of that. It's like a self-defeating thing, or not
yeah,
self-defeating, but
that's part of it. That's definitely what you just said is part of it. The other part of it is once you're at a certain level of consciousness, what you think you are dissolves, which what I talked about in the last two oversharings. I don't know how I just say meditate and contemplate, because you listen to an asshole like me talk all day, but it's not going to help you much. Like, it dissolves. Like, and then it's like, why do you care anymore? Like, you don't care. Just, you realize what the body is and what it is. Like, that's the thing. And yeah, miracles happen. And like I was telling you and sharing about Ramana Maharshi, or the stories we hear about the miracles of Christ and stuff like that. I believe miracles are absolutely can happen. Things do happen. This world is really trippy. It's not as like, it's not the way we think it is. It's extremely trippy, and there are paranormal quote unquote things and miracles and stuff like that. But the thing is, if most of the time, if you're in an energy that can transcend that structural pattern, you're not going to want to do it anyway. I can tell you for a fact, you're not going to give a shit.
yeah. It's like, well, I mean, I guess you have to really have a want and a love for skateboarding. Maybe if you have this like inner desire to really be like Tony Hawk, or like from Christian Slater from Gleaming the Cube, some shout outs there. You could attain this level of consciousness, and maybe you're getting over somehow finding a way to skateboard again after being in a wheelchair is going to inspire, the right person. Maybe it can be done. We don't want to limit you, paraplegic. We're not saying that, it's impossible, but it's, go ahead.
Yeah, nothing's impossible, I guess, is what you're saying, what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's like Morpheus says to Neo in the Matrix when he's like, "Are you telling me I could dodge bullets?" And he's like, "When you get ready, you won't need to." Like, or when you get to a certain level, you don't even need to dodge bullets anymore. It's that same kind of thing. I think it's like when you get to a certain level of consciousness, all those other things are going to fall away, and you're not going to care about it anymore. Yeah. There's something else I was going to say, but it'll come back to me. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm following your lead.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. I was gonna have you bring up something. Oh, yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about the experience that you had, if you want, with kind of tapping into higher consciousness for that brief time that you did.
Yeah. All right. So I went for a bike ride when I lived in that house that I quote unquote manifested. Which that's, I don't want to digress, but okay. So I was living in
No,
that
go ahead,
place, and
please.
I used to ride my bike just for recreation, like. And I was riding my bike one morning, and there's all these farm fields between these two villages in Germany where I was living. And so and it was like a really cold day, but the sun was out and the sun was really warm. And I felt the sun hitting my face, and it felt really good. And I was really into like things like Wim Hof at the time, and like doing breathing exercises and stuff like that. So all I did was start, as I'm riding my bike, instead of like huffing and puffing, like I just tried to slow my breath down and relax. And all this tension in my body as I was riding along the path, I was just trying to relax. And the next thing I knew, I relaxed the boundary, but that I felt between me and my external environment. And just like David R. Hawkins says, you get like a sensation that it feels like melting. It feels like you've been melted. And the next thing I knew, I wasn't the body anymore. I was everything. There's people walking up and down the path or riding their bikes around the path. And the same sensation I had of pedaling my legs, I had the sensation of pedaling their legs, and the sensation of the birds flying across the field. And I was the sensation I was making the wind blow. And like it was just like the same way you're like, you can wiggle your fingers right now and you have the sensation that quote unquote, and you have the thought, I'm wiggling my fingers. Like I had the same kind of thing going on, with everything, including the sun shining. It's very hard to describe. And but basically I became the next fractal, and I realized that this was sort of a dream and that I was dreaming all this up. And there was this, what swept through the consciousness was, I could only say love, like a joy, a love, and I felt like everything, the fabric of everything was love, like that was the energy everything was coming out of. And that, I don't know how long that must have lasted, 10 minutes maybe. And then I got back into the village where I lived, and I started slowly coming back into my body. And for the rest of the day, I was just so happy and joyful. And even though I was back to ego consciousness, I was back to that sensation of separateness. But the thing that came out of that experience was that memory, though it didn't last very long earthly time, like has forever been burned into my nervous system. And I mean, I go throughout my day and sometimes I forget about it, but at any time I could just kind of remember. And that sensation, to a lesser degree, not as extreme, comes back. And that changed my life. I mean, I went into all kinds of avenues after that, but the big thing was, man, fuck the occult. Like, I'm not getting anything from the occult that I got just that one experience. And now I know that's possible. And now I have something to shoot for. Like, I have a different context of my existence and life. And yeah, it's something I wish everybody to experience. And if I had the ability, I would have everybody experience that just for just a minute.
Yeah, I think the world would be a much different place if everyone experienced that for a minute, and maybe it wouldn't work the way it's supposed to anymore. So, Yeah. But yeah, I've read a lot about that experience. I've heard secondhand information, from people explaining it. You've explained it before. And I think that it kind of reminds me of psychedelics a little bit, like psychedelics might be kind of a shortcut to get there, certain plant medicines. But again, it goes back to what we said. If you're not ready for something, then it's not going to have the result that you wanted it to. Not that I'm saying, demonizing any kind of plant medicine or whatever. Everyone has their own path, but it's kind of like the whole be careful what you wish for thing, or like a genie. You get 3 wishes and you think you want to be rich or famous or whatever it is, and then you attain what you wish for, and it's just not like a true spiritual guru or master. I guess I could say, if they were offered 3 wishes, they would just deny them. They'd just be like, no thank you. Like, I don't need this. Because I feel like all these things that we attain, there's steps to them. We can get there. We just have to put our intention and really just model our life, I guess, to be that way. And yeah, I think that was a beautiful experience that you had. And it's amazing how it basically changed your whole point of view. And now you're on this path to just raise your consciousness as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying. I just know it's going to unfold, and I just always want to see things from a more expanded context, I guess, is what I'm trying to do. Like, I for the year after that, I got really into like like, spirituality, like kind of like the things Ram Dass talks about, where you just try this and you try that, and like nothing is like working. And I stopped listening to like rock and heavy metal music. I was like, oh, that shit's negative. I can't listen to that shit anymore. All classical for me, baby. And then it was like I realized I do like some sort of classical music, but my life is becoming more dull. I didn't feel more spiritual. I felt more boring. And then I realized, okay, maybe I can like not be so, try so hard, because I think trying too hard definitely seems to hold you back. And yeah, I just want to enjoy my life, and I know that's possible, and I believe that is my destiny. I don't know how it's going to play out. I leave that to God. But I don't just abandon the physicality either. Like it sounds like that's what the new agers sometimes seem like. The thing with new ageism is it's coming out of a negative energy. Passivity is a prideful energy. Passivity comes from clenching your butt. Passivity is like for instance, if you saw a woman getting robbed, and and you just sat back and you're like, no, that's God's will. It's like, no, if you're actually doing God's will, you're gonna beat the shit out of that guy, depending on the context of who you are, and blah blah blah. Like you're not. It's like you're not gonna be like, oh, like that's not how it is. That's a false. That's a structural rule, like clenching your butt and like clenching, like how Alan Watts used to say, it's like the ego is like a clenching energy. That's why like they talk about letting go, because if you notice, you're clenching all these emotions and stuff like that. And yeah, that passivity is a negative energy. It's not a spiritual energy. Like sometimes you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, so to speak. You're a poker player, you know what I mean? Like it's like,
Oh yeah, I love that
yeah,
song.
yeah. It's not all like rainbow farts and unicorns. Like that's not spirituality. I'm not above kicking the shit out of you, and I know, and I'll be spiritually righteous depending on what the context is overall. Like it's I'm not above putting a bullet in you if I had to. Like it's not like that. Like it's yes, that hips like version. That's not it. That's a prideful energy, thinking you know better, that you know better than God. Sometimes the perfect expression of God is a punch in the nose. Like it's
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, I guess this person's learning through suffering today. You know what I mean? Get over it. So, yeah.
exactly. I mean, you don't want to just like dish out violence, of course, but then again, like you don't go looking for trouble. But if you're going to be the instrument to bring the universe into balance that day, then so be it. The weight of a keto, baby. Like
Yeah. It reminds me more of like Taoism, I guess you could say, in a certain sense, like they're just about the way it is. It's the way, and the way could be anything. It's just all in a balance. Shout out to Spoons. She's in the chat. She said it makes sense that all these things are tools. Tools are just ways to make something quicker or shortcut. And with that, there can be great gains or losses. Shortcuts wouldn't exist if they weren't meant to be taken, but they are not for everyone. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just like miracles. We talked about this on the Oversharing show, I believe, where certain people, when they get to a level, they have powers that they can express, but then they learn that they don't even want to use these powers. But once in a while, sometimes they will perform some kind of miracle, because it's that little bit of what'd you call it, paranormal, whatever, that somebody needs. They're like a nut that's ready to be cracked, and that little thing that happens, it's the right place, right time, and it cracks the nut for them. And but again, I don't think these things are something to be played with, because once you start to play with these powers, if you get them, then you get the ego, and then you think it's you, and then people come to you and they try to worship you. And it's so funny. They put you on a pedestal. Really, at the end of the day, it comes back to that whole pit and pedestal thing, where if you put somebody on a pedestal, then you have to put somebody else in a pit. And who are we putting on a pit? If we're putting on someone on a pedestal, usually we're putting the they, the them. It's the Illuminati. We put them in the pit, and we just go along in victim consciousness or narrative or whatever it is.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, Sharon says, Shannon, I always say Sharon instead of Shannon. No drugs for me, only smoked weed in my life and not after. Often. Oh, not often. Yeah, I actually overcame. I was smoking weed like every day. Right now, if you see me smoking, it's just I have tobacco. I get these organic leaves and cut them up. But I never even really smoked cigarettes back in the day. I just kind of got into tobacco because I was smoking a lot of blunts. It's funny because I went to the Marine Corps when I was 18 and I quit everything except for drinking, of course, because that's legal. So, well, not when I was 18, but there's not a test for it. So, and then I even slowed down my drinking when I was in the Marines, and I really didn't, after I got out, I didn't touch weed again until like my mid or late 30s. But my issue was women. I still had some itch to scratch, and I was using women to fill this empty void that I had inside me. And what's up, kitty? My cat's over here crying. And once speaking of pussy, no, once so dirty. Once I guess saw what that was about, I had an experience. I guess it's not really unlike your experience. It's just one of these, it's like a rock bottom moment, kind of, some people call it, but it's just this moment of, I guess you can even say, enlightenment, where you realize what you're actually doing. Because on my end, I was just looking very close, and then all of a sudden I got this giant zoom out of what was really going on with my life. And I was like, oh shit, this is not what I wanted to do at all. Like, this is what I meant to do. So from there, it was just a stream of like a dark night of the soul, they call it, where I just had a new point of view and I didn't know how to be in the world. And I had to kind of go over all my behavior again and just try different things out. And I started smoking weed when I was doing comedy again. And it's something that actually really helped me. So I'm not even going to demonize it. But after a while, I was doing it every day. And then for some reason this year on 420, I ran out and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop for a month. And I stopped for a month and then I tried it again. And I was like, wow, I can actually get high again. So now I'm at the point where I just do it like once in a while, maybe once a week or so, or more or less, depending on what's going on. But I usually just do it at night and stuff. But it's really helped me in the fact that like I've been able to get more stuff done. I guess I'm just more focused, and I could, like, the writing and stuff, like every morning lately, I've either been writing or editing what I've been working on and stuff. Even if it's for a little bit, sometimes it's the whole day. It consumes me, which is awesome. And so, yeah, I think everybody has their own path, and that's why I don't think I'm against it or for it. It's just something that's here, and it could be very healing. Because one thing it did for me, especially early on, was I was able to actually kind of step back from my life and see things through a wider angle and see what my behavior, where it actually led. And it was like forcing me to look at stuff. Like I had a mushroom trip that I did too. It was the first time I did mushrooms when I was 2014, I think it was. So I was probably like 36 or something. I'm terrible at math. It's really funny. I've been saying to everybody lately that I'm 47 because I had a birthday in July, but I actually turned 46, and it's kind of blown my mind right now because I'm like, I really thought I was 47. Like I lost a year somehow, but I'm like, well, it's 2022 and I was born in 1976. So I guess I'm 46, right? That's how the math works out. So anyway, I'm terrible at math, or maybe I just shifted into a different realm and I'm just 46 now. I don't know. I did get an inch taller in the past 3 years somehow. So, I mean, who knows? But, yeah, the whole mushroom thing was crazy. I had this vision. I saw something. It was like kind of scary. And it was like I could see up into my bathroom. And because I lived on the second floor at the time of this 2-family house, and we were in the backyard. It's like a really nice big backyard. We were just hanging out near the fire pit. And I looked up and I saw like red in there. And then all of a sudden my consciousness was like transported in there, and I could see blood and everything everywhere. And it looked like a murder scene. And I was like really starting to bug out. And then my friend handed me a leaf and he's like, dude, and I wasn't saying anything. I was just in my head. And he's like, dude, check out this leaf. And I felt it. And then all of a sudden everything changed. And then we went upstairs and I didn't think anything of it. And then I would have either like dreams or kind of like, not like flashbacks, but sort of like a flashback to that moment. And later, the way that I described what happened, or the way that I interpret it now, is that I had a relationship, because I was in a relationship previously and we were living in that house. And I kind of, through my behavior, I kind of murdered that relationship. That's one way that I look at it. And another one is I was actually starting to kind of kind of exhibit like psychopathic behaviors, you could say. And if I stayed on that road, who knows, maybe I would have turned into like a murderer or something, right? Like, I don't know. So I took out of that whatever it was. And then from there, I just kind of, I don't know, I had this experience maybe a year after that was or so, where and this is when I might have been a little high on weed or whatever, but I kind of saw everything that was going on with my behavior. And I just had this moment where I saw what it was, and I fell on the ground and I was laughing because of how stupid I was. And I also had tears coming out, so it was like one of these things where I was laughing and kind of crying at the same time, but I guess they were like tears of joy. But I was just like, I was so wrong. And I was laughing at how stupid I was, to have this worldview that I had previously. And so I guess I kind of had my similar experience, but uh like you say, there's all these ways. The way this realm works is really freaking mind-blowing. It's crazy. But I think if you're just open to it and honest, things like this will happen to you and can happen to you. But not everybody's meant to have this stuff happen or see this. It's like in the Bible where it says many people have wished or wanted to see what you've seen and haven't seen them, and all that kind of stuff. So I think everybody has their own path, and you could kind of learn from other people and what they've been through, but you can't exactly go through what they do. You can hear Joe say he had that great experience and then being like, must be nice. Like, I want to do that. And then you try it and you try it, but that might not be your path. You have a different path.
The only thing I could think of what could have brought that about is prayers. I said, kind of often not exactly verbal, but just like what is the truth? Like I want to know what the truth is. I truly do want to know what the truth is. And if I can't know it in this lifetime, I'm fine with that. I've accepted, but I don't want to know lies, and I don't want to hold on to bullshit belief systems if I don't have to. And so I think I was just open to that. And yeah, I mean, every spiritual tradition teaches the same things: meditation, contemplation, prayer. Meditation, contemplation, prayer. It's not that difficult. It's just
Yeah, exactly.
consistent and attention.
Except the new age, they like to keep you meditating a lot of times, and you get into non-action, like you were saying earlier. You get into this passive state, and that's not what we're saying. Zindra says Joe never talked about how he managed to manifest some things. You said he would talk about that, and then he didn't want them. You said he would talk about that, and then that he didn't want them. Well, we actually did talk about that in the Oversharing show. If you go back to episode, we just had him on for episode 33, and then there's an episode before that. But the long and the short of it was, he found these different ways to manifest by studying the occult, and he had this idea of a house that he wanted next to a river in the mountains in Germany. And basically one day his girlfriend came home and said, hey, we found this place. It's really cool. We can rent and we can afford it. And he got there, and it was basically what he was trying to manifest. Is that right? Did I get that right, Joe?
Conceptually, it wasn't exactly how I imagined it when I did the sigils and shit, but
sorry, that was just me going on YouTube. Go ahead.
I was like, that sounds like a cat. Anyways, but what was I saying?
The house and that you manifested.
Yeah. I mean, the archetypes were all there. It wasn't exactly how it was in my mind's eye, but all the features were there. All the, like, it being on a mountain by a river next to the woods. Like, I could walk 5 minutes up this hill and be in the woods. Like, it was just like, there literally was a castle on top of the mountain. Like, the house was built into the side of the mountain, and if you went all the way up the trail to the top, there's a castle like that was allegedly built in the year 1000 or whatever. This is like one of the oldest areas of Regensburg. I mean, of Germany, allegedly, this Regensburg area. And yeah, it was played out through synchronicity. And I had done some rituals using sigils and candles and all kinds of things numerous times with that kind of idea put into what I was trying to get. And then I forgot about it, that's how everything always manifests when you forget about it. If like it was the saying, like a watch pot never boils,
Yep.
like it doesn't really come when you're thinking about it. It always catches you by surprise and through synchronicity. So yeah, I did some things for a few months. I did keep a magical quote unquote journal at the time, because part of the neophyte grade was to do this such of thing. And yeah, it came. I got it. It was awesome. Lost its fucking lust. And by the time I after I had that experience, like I told you guys about earlier, like I didn't care about it anymore. And then all of a sudden my landlord knocks on the door one day and tells me and my woman that we have to move because she wants to sell the house. And I'm like, what? Like, and then there's like this whole conflict because we had a contract and all that. And it was just like negative energies, synchronicity playing out all the way till I got the house, and negative energies all the way out of the house. And then we finally, Sandra and I were finally at peace when we fucking got out of that place.
Nice. Yeah, it's like one of those it reminds me of the Amityville horror movie where they're like, they want this great house and they finally get it, and then it's like, no, you didn't want that house. I did put a link to that right now in the chat, and that Oversharing episode. And Rivan0277 asks, my mind wanders and I can't pray. Sometimes I can't finish a sentence. Any pointers on how to turn my mind off? Well, I'm glad you asked, because this is something else I've been writing about too. And I'll let Joe give his end, but I'm going to chime in really quickly. And I'll say that what I found about meditation, because I went through all that stuff I was talking about with the mushrooms and all that, but also I was daily meditating too. I tried doing it for a while. I tried to get a meditation practice and it never worked. But eventually what happened was I realized that meditation isn't really about shutting your thoughts off or turning off your brain, because that's basically impossible. I mean, maybe it's attainable, but what happens is I realized that your brain is just a thought generating machine. You could look at it that way, or you can just look at thoughts coming through. They're not you. But the way I was able to work around that was I saw it as you're going to sit down, right, to meditate, and you find an anchor. A lot of people start off by using their breath. So they just take some deep breaths, like maybe 10 deep breaths, and they're sitting there, and then you breathe normal, and you can count your breaths if you want. That's something you can anchor your attention to. And what you do is you're always going to have these thoughts pop up. So as they pop up, you just let them go, and then you go back to your breath. And it's going to be hard at first. Sometimes I meditated for 20 minutes and I only remember counting 2 breaths because I was lost in thought. So what it really is about is it's like exercising, right? Like when you go to the gym, you do different reps, and every time that you realize you're lost in thought and you let it go, it's kind of like you're doing a rep. So the key is that, and also to not get mad at yourself when you get lost in thought. You're just like, okay, I was lost in thought. Let me come back to my breath. And then you sit there, focus on your breath, and all of a sudden another thought comes in. And you think about the rent, or you think about your ex-girlfriend, or a phone bill, or food, or is it lunchtime, or I got to do this tomorrow. And then you get wrapped up in that thought. You're creating this whole world in your mind. And then you're like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be meditating. And you say, okay, let it go. And it's just as mundane and boring sounding as that. That's exactly what it is. But after a while, if you do it like I did a daily practice, you get to the point where in your daily life, when you get lost in thought like that, you could just start to let it go, and you can even reach higher levels of that. And it's really about not identifying with your thoughts. You know, it's just kind of about realizing that you are not your thoughts. And we were talking earlier in this episode about how your thoughts are basically just coming in from this realm. It's just a way, wherever you're vibrating on is where all these thoughts are going to come. Like when you go to the refrigerator, you just find yourself in front of the refrigerator and you're like, well, why did I even do that? You know, it's kind of like you're an iron filing, and there's this field of energy that's arranging you in a certain pattern. And the only thing you could really do is learn how to get up to a different level of vibration, I guess you could call it. Oh, what's up? What's up? Austin's in there. Yo, check this out, Austin. Look at that. Yo. Anyway, big shout out to the Melodome. Go subscribe to his channel. I heard some really good things we recorded earlier with Davin for the Oversharing show. That'll be out next week, or in 2 weeks. Yeah, because we have Chance coming out next week. So check that out. But Davin was giving you guys a shout out there, Austin. He was saying how he's been listening to for years. So yeah, that's what I would say, Ravon. Just don't give up. Think about it like exercising, because my pitfalls, I would just get mad at myself when I couldn't do it. And that's kind of like it just brings you the other way, you know? What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely meditation is very helpful. It is my opinion that you're not supposed to meditate your entire life necessarily. I think you're supposed to meditate to get yourself into one of those things like I described earlier. So it's burned into your nervous system. Like I actually think that the better way to go on it, like meditation's great. Do it as long as you feel like you need to do it. But a
Yeah.
better
Well,
way to
just
go.
so you got everybody knows too, I don't meditate currently now every day. Like I came to a point where I stopped, and now every once in a while I'll do it when I kind of want to center myself or whatever, but it's been a while, you know. So but anyway, go ahead. Yeah. That's the
Yeah,
important thing. You gotta know when to stop.
the only time I meditate now is if I happen to be walking in the woods and I might sit down and then I just meditate because I feel like the same way a cat gets into that meditative state, to just do it because, oh, I'm right here. I'm on the windowsill. Let me start fucking meditating, purring. That's kind of how I approach meditation now, but I don't do it regularly anymore either. Um, I say the better way is contemplation and prayer, and contemplation would be, it's not as you would think about it. Contemplations when you focus on the context instead of the content. Like you focus on the magnetic field, not the iron filing. So you don't worry about your thoughts and your emotions and shit like that. You just try to see things from a different, like from an expanded, like perception. Like for instance, today I was at work and we're very short on people right now because magically throughout society we're short on people and short on workers.
Gee, I wonder why. It's kind of like
Yeah,
everybody said, "Hey, take this experimental medical serum," and puffto, or presto, there was less people.
yeah, so we got all this work dumped on us, and I'm like, fuck this, and then I caught myself, and then I was like, I changed the context. I'm like, no, actually, this is the best job I've ever had in my life, and it is, and I get to make music all day, and then I go here in the evening, and it's like 4 or 5 hours out of my day every day, and I'm really good at what I do, and my coworkers are pretty cool for the most part, and and then all the emotions and the thoughts that arise out of that new contextual field are more in line with a higher energy. And prayer is basically the same thing as well. If you actually go back in the book of Matthew and you're reading about the Lord's Prayer, it is not a prayer strung out linear, like a linear line. Christ literally said as a preface before he recited the Lord's Prayer is don't mindlessly mouth words. And then everyone mindlessly mouths the Lord's Prayer. How I
How
see the
dare
Lord's
you?
how I see
Sorry.
the Lord's Prayer is not a prayer, it is prayer. It is prayer. It's a contextual field. Look at it non-linear. Look at it as one big tapestry and not like word for word, like sentence to sentence. It's an overall context. And from that context, you open yourself up to grace, to the Holy Spirit, if you want to use Christian terminology. And that is a form of contemplation. Prayer and contemplation are, I guess, in the sense, the same thing. But constantly do that through the day. That's the exact way that as Brandon was describing meditation, you could do that as you go about your day-to-day existence. And you could just all of a sudden become grateful, like I did with my job today. And then you start thinking about the context of the Lord's Prayer. Like I don't have to memorize the Lord's Prayer anymore. It's just a context, an overall energy field. And then the next thing I know, I'll get an insight, or everything, all the iron filings of my consciousness are getting arranged by that state of contemplation. That's what contemplation actually is. It's not like focusing in on the details. It's learning to look at the context, because there's always, as you were sitting here listening to me, you have a context. It could be like, this guy's full of shit. Or like, oh, I like the show, whatever your context is. But basically, if you pay attention, that there's a contextual field going on behind all the dots, behind all the emotions, behind your breathing and whatnot. And that is your spirit. Context of spirit to me are synonymous. And that's the level of yourself you want to come out of.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just typing in there. Austin was like, "Damn, nice Jay," and I was like, "No, it's just tobacco. Maybe later I'll do some a little bit of weed." But and Shannon says, "So meditation isn't just sitting. I do it on walks, cooking, doing art before sleep, etc." Yeah, it's really about what I found is, and this I didn't mention. It's about the present moment. Really, it's about present moment awareness and being aware. Because honestly, the present moment is really only the thing that exists. The past is already dead and gone, and the future is just a lie we tell ourselves, you know. So when you're lost in thought, you're either lost in the present, or I mean, you're either lost in the future or the past. And it's really about just bringing yourself back to this moment and looking around. And I remember another thing I did was I was microdosing mushrooms for a time, and you do like a small little dose that doesn't get you high every like 3 days or something. I can't remember. I looked it up and I was like following this thing, and it kind of helped me with that too. It helped me get into this more meditative state. And I'm not saying that everybody should do it, but everybody has a different path, right? And I remember one specific time I was in Marshall's and it happened to be like an on day, and I was in line. And you know how when you're standing around, you have like an awareness of like maybe 10 or 12 feet around you. Well, my awareness was like the walls of Marshall's. Like I was looking at everything, like I could see everything that was going on in the store. And I was just so tuned into the present moment. And that's one thing I wanted to add really, is about how important and sacred this present moment is. It's literally a present. And like you were saying with the contemplation and prayer thing, it's even like a step above meditation. But all this stuff is really, I see it as exercise to put yourself in the present moment, because we are all slaves to the past and the future a lot of times when we start out with this stuff. So, you know, and what I would say to what is her name, Zindra, I believe it was, she's was saying how she's in a lot of suffering right now and stuff. And I mean, I don't really like to give advice, like Galdor said in Lord of the Rings in the beginning when he came across Frodo. He's like, the elves, we don't give advice anymore. You know, he's like, we're done. We know, you know. And if you read the Silmarillion, you'll see why they don't give advice anymore. But what I could say is that what worked for me before was always trying to say, like, even when I was in the Marines, when I was in boot camp, right? I mean, you can't get any more suffering than that. You got people screaming in your face, you know, like you're like soaking wet and it's freezing out and all this stuff. And what I would say is it can always be worse. You know, you can always be, do you have two legs? Are you walking? You know, look at Paraplegic Bear. He was in the chat before. He's probably still around. This guy can't even walk, but yet he's crushing it. Like every time I see him, he's always like streaming on Instagram or whatever. He's like showing his day, he's doing things, and he's still out there doing it. He's not letting despair or whatever his circumstances are get to him. And so what I would say is maybe you could just say, well, at least I'm not Paraplegic Bear. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
Yeah,
at least, at least I'm not in Afghanistan, like you were in Afghanistan, or, you know, you're like, at least I'm not a one of these starving children in Africa, or whatever it is you have to say. You could start to look around, and then from that you could get some kind of love of where you're at or whatever. You could start to accept it a little more, because all this stuff you're going through now, later you're going to look back on it and it's possible you're going to laugh, right? And I always say, if you're going to, like, I would say to people, hey, we're probably going to look back on this later and laugh. So why not laugh now? You know, it's funny. It's somehow there's humor in it. Like I really believe Jesus, if he really existed, he was a comedian. You know, like God's probably a comedian. We're going to get up there or whatever. You know, I think humor is a really important aspect of this realm if you're able to see it, because it just is a way of alchemizing all these bad things into a different way of looking at it and laughing and feeling joy. But what were you going to say? I don't want to cut you off.
yeah, exactly. Everything you just said is to build a context of gratitude, which is prayer, part of prayer. So it's yeah, when you see things out of gratitude, try to find something to be grateful out of this current situation, and you then concentrate more on that context of gratitude more than the dots, because the dots are just happening of their own. The emotions are rising of their own. The world is doing its thing. The skycock is playing out, like, but you have free will on the level of that. you get to choose the context. And if you're so heavy right now, then that's what prayer is. And maybe it will take that much suffering before you finally let go. And yeah, it's just, but
Yeah.
everything works out in the end. And try to be a little stoic about things. This too will pass.
Yeah. And, another thing is, are you white? I mean, if you're white, you basically, that's great. You know what I'm saying? At least you're not black. No, I'm just, but no, there are so many things to be thankful for. You could speak, you could, if you can walk, if you could, whatever it is you can do. I try to wake up. I don't always do this too. And it's something I'm glad, thank you, Zindra, because you reminded me of this. I try to wake up in the morning and have my first thought be one of gratitude for whatever it is, no matter how shitty I think my day is going to be or whatever I got to do. I always try to have some gratitude for it because it goes a long way. It really does. It's amazing because it's just a viewpoint. That's what I found out. Life, the difference between suffering and non-suffering is just the way you look at it. Jupiter says, we woke up today, guys. You woke up today. Spoon says that life is hilarious. Yeah, reframe or get out. Why are you still there? What can you do? Exactly. That's exactly it. And it's really just about your viewpoint, because that's the only thing that you actually have control of. That's the free will aspect, is how are you going to look at things? I mean, yeah, your actions to a certain extent, but like you say, a lot of times we're just iron filings in this magnetic field. So even our actions are kind of aligning and we can make choices and stuff. And I think that begins with how we look at it. Oh, Paraplegic Bear says, oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. So yeah, it's about getting joy and finding a reason to have gratitude. And then I think as you align with that vibration, synchronicities line up and they'll come to you. Like, you don't even have to really manifest. Manifestation for me now is more about kind of just being open to what happens and having an idea of what I might need to get where I want and focus on that maybe. But then again, if I manifest some land out, say I manifest this great homestead and stuff, I could be there and then I could be miserable because all my goats are dying and all this stuff. Like, I was talking to this guy at a bear meetup and he's like, I got goats. He goes, but nobody tells you that you think that goats can eat everything. He's like, they can't even eat oak leaves. He's like, all my goats ate like all this stuff and then they died. He's like, so it's not as easy as you think. All these people want all this stuff. And we've talked about this before, how farming is a sin. Oh, it was hilarious. Yeah, but it really is about just accepting what comes your way, because you are a unique being and you have something here. There is a purpose for you here. So maybe it's just to be a Brandon Bonanza chat member and a slave to me, I'm just kidding. But yeah,
Could be worse.
yeah, it could be worse. And something I did in all my times of despair and suffering is I would always focus on some kind of comedy. I used to watch South Park a lot. Now I watch Owen Benjamin because he's hilarious. Maybe he's not the answer for everybody, but find some kind of humor, something that's going to make you laugh, because when you laugh, you are literally vibrating on a different level, as terrible as it is. So I'd say humor and thankfulness. Watch the Melodome, watch that show. Those guys are hilarious. Austin's funny. Just keep doing it. And, that's all I guess I could say. Like I said, I don't really have advice for people, but laughter is the best medicine,
You're here.
Find something that makes you laugh. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you all night because I know that it's very late there in Deutschland.
Yeah,
to Deutschland.
2 in the
So,
morning.
oh, wow. Yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to get on while we're here? What do you think?
Not really. I mean, I could go as long as you want, but it's all go either way with me, man.
Are you tired?
Not really.
Oh, we could talk a little longer then. We don't have to go. Yeah, what? Let's go deeper on this whole thing of laughter, because if you even look at the Patch Adams movie, right? Robin Williams was a clown and he was going around healing kids. And let's see, Zindra says, I need to find some type of joy because I haven't really laughed in many years. Yeah, laugh. And that's why, like, I love really silly humor. So maybe go watch some old South Park episodes. I don't know, or Family Guy, or so much of this stuff is just like it's terrible. But if you think about now, it's like you look back on it and you're like, oh gee, that's but
Yeah,
it, it-
I got a pretty good story actually while we're on that kind of topic. Like
yeah, go ahead.
the worst trip I ever had. I did mushrooms many times when I was a kid, like a teenager in Florida, but I took them, I don't know, 8 years ago, and I had a really bad trip, and I picked up right off. Every time I take mushrooms, I go right back into that space that I left off on. For like the first half hour, it's like, whoa. And then all of a sudden I remember, oh shit, I'm back in this mushroom space. Fuck my life. But it's,
Fuck my
uh,
life.
yeah, I was having a really bad trip. It was like horrible. It was literally like hell. Like time wouldn't move. Like it was just like really like a horrible, heavy existence. And I managed to get my laptop open and started watching some stand up. I think I was watching Dave Chappelle back when Dave Chappelle used to be funny. And I was watching one of his stand-ups, and at first I was like kind of laugh, going through the motions of laughing, like a Beavis and Butthead kind of thing. But eventually, he started vibing with me, and then he started talking about in his stand-up thing about his mushroom trip and how it freaked him the fuck out, and it was hilarious, and it got more hilarious, and the next thing I knew, the trip was gone. All that heaviness I just released from the laughter, and the trip ended.
That's crazy. I could share something that happened to me. I shared on another episode, but it's pretty funny. I was in August, I was down in Atlantic City, good old AC, New Jersey. I was there for a DJ convention. So we stayed overnight and we went to the convention during the day. We were just looking at equipment and stuff because they have this big like floor set up and everybody, you go in there and like everybody has speakers and smoke and like bubbles and everybody's like playing different music. It like drives me nuts. I'm just like, ah. But it's a good place to get good deals and see the new equipment. So I was in there with the guy that owns our company, and we had another friend with us that DJs with us. And as we were leaving, we ran into this other guy. Like we were already checked out of our hotel. We were just at this thing. We were going to go to the car, get food, and leave, or even get food on the way home. So as we're walking out, I hear, "It's Jesus!" Like yelling at my direction. Because I'm like, for you don't know, I'm like 6'5". I stand above the crowd and look at how I look, right? So is this Jewish guy that we know, oh Jesus, that's also a DJ that my boss, because I started DJing when I was like 32 and now I'm 46, not 47, Brandon. And my friend is about 44, I think it is, 70, 78, yeah, 44. And he's been DJing since he was like 17, and he's known this guy who's my age or something since he was 17. And he's typical grabbler type of, he's a nice guy, but he has this really bad grabbler tendency. So we don't really work with him that much anymore. But so we came over to him, we were saying what's up, we're still all friendly and stuff. And he's like, "Oh my God, it's Jesus." And he's one of these people who can't be embarrassed. You could just tell him to go up to somebody and say whatever. This Jewish guy, he doesn't care. Like he has no fear about that stuff. So he's like making a big scene and making it funny. And we take a picture. And then my friend Dwayne, who's the one who taught me how to DJ, the owner of the company, he's like, "Oh, Brandon," he's like, "Tell Ari," of course his name is Ari. He's like, "Tell Ari that thing." And I'm like, "What thing?" He's like, "About the 2020. I was like, "Oh, the Holocaust." And I was like, "Yeah, the Holocaust." And Ari started laughing. And then immediately he was like, "Oh my God." He's like, "That's so offensive." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "You laughed." And I thought that he thought it was offensive because of the whole 6 million incident, whatever. But he thought it was offensive because he believes the mainstream narrative with 2020. He thinks that was a real thing. So I was ready to get into the whole 6 million might be a little high thing. I wanted to like try to, bust that spell on him. But I know we didn't have enough time for it. So once I realized it was just about that, I just started laughing. And I said to him, like, "You laughed." I'm like, "How can you be offended if you laughed?" I'm like, "You're worse than me because you laughed at it." You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's a funny one. And then also I have a joke that I've been telling where I say, I found the journey in life to truth is really one from A to Z. And unfortunately, a lot of people get stuck on the J's.
Good one.
So there's some comedy for you. Yeah. So, but yeah, find something that makes you laugh is, I guess is what we could say. But Yeah, I don't know, man. Humor really helped me all throughout the times of my life. Whenever I was feeling despair, or whatever, I would just put something on. Like South Park, I was a big fan of that. Probably from like the second year it was on. I remember everyone talking about it, and then I finally started listening to it when I was in the Marines. And no matter what would happen, I would just laugh and I'd feel better about it, you know. So even at boot camp, like I remember I was the kind of like a joker, but I was never really joking when the drill instructors were around. You know, I
Oh
wasn't trying
no.
to play pranks on them. But when they weren't around, yeah, that's like Full Metal Jacket. That is like a documentary. That's really how boot camp is.
Yes.
Except they
Yes.
can't. They're not supposed to hit you anymore, but they'll make you do things
Oh,
where it's like, just hit
they'll
me.
hit. They'll hit you. They used to take it. Wait till we got to the fucking range, and then they say you pointed a rifle at them, and then they beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, yeah, that's a thing too. Or they'll just make you like do push-ups and run in place and all this stuff until you wish they would just hit you. You know, it's like, but so I would always joke around when the drill instructors are around. We'd have our own kind of like square away time at night. They give us like an hour to write letters or do whatever we want. So we'd always joke around to make jokes. And people would be like, this one guy in particular, he'd always be like, "Oh, you got to take this seriously. You can't joke around. This isn't a fucking joke, man. This isn't a joke, right?" And I'd be like, "No, dude, like you got to laugh at this because you'll go crazy, right?" And I think I might have put a spell on him because so speaking of the rifle range, one day we were at the rifle range and we're in South Carolina, Paris Island, and this crazy thunderstorm moved in. So out of nowhere, they're like, "All right, everybody, just grab a rifle and we're gonna get back here before the lightning and thunder gets too bad." So everybody kind of just, because the way we stack our rifles, you might probably be familiar with this. When you get somewhere, you just do like a rifle stack and everyone leans it and whatever. So like, don't worry about getting your own, just make sure you get one. And then when we get back to the barracks, we'll give you one. So everybody grabbed a rifle, ran back to the barracks. And when we got back to the barracks, everything's going great. The drill instructors were in a good mood. They're like, "All right," because we got poured on, so we're soaking wet. And like, "We're gonna get into some nice dry clothes. We're gonna get some warm chow." We're all excited because the 2 weeks you're at the rifle range, they kind of take it easy on you a little bit because you have to pass in order to be a Marine, and they want you to be a Marine. They're spending all this money on you. So they're pretty cool with you. So, and then all of a sudden, our company commander, who's a captain, like busts the door open and comes in, and we're in a squad bay. There's like 70 something of us. And he comes in and we're all like, "Attention on deck," you know, so we all stand at attention. And he walks by us and he has a rifle in his hand. And we're like, "Oh, fuck." Somebody left a rifle back there. And not that it's bad. So what happened was this guy, right when we got back to the barracks, everybody exchanged rifles because our names were on the bottom. We taped them on there. And this one guy didn't get his rifle back, but he didn't say anything. He just was like, And it was the same guy that's like, "You got to take this seriously," right? It was this guy. And he was actually the tallest one in our platoon. I was the second tallest. So I had to take him out. No, I'm just kidding. So the company commander goes in with the drill instructor in his little office, and you could just hear him screaming at him. And then he walks out. And then the drill instructor was like, "All right, you want to play a game?" So we basically got undressed and dressed into the same wet clothes. And it was cold in there because they kept that squad bay air conditioned, you know, because they want you, when you're at the rifle range, they want you really comfortable. So it was like freezing. So we're getting dressed, undressed, you know, put your underwear on, take it off, all this crazy shit. And that guy, maybe they rode him really hard because of that. And like a week later, he just like disappeared. I guess he tried to run away and then he just snapped. He lost it. And they found him and they brought him back and they put like, he had this bathrobe on. He was like shivering. And then they ended up getting kicked out or whatever. But yeah, it's like, that's what happens when you're taller. Now I'm the tallest bitch. No, but it's when you take things too seriously, it's like the story is like a little microcosm of life. If you take it too seriously, you can snap, because I really do think it's some kind of like cosmic joke that's being played on us. And I think we signed up for it. That's the thing. Like, I don't think it's, we're the butt of the joke. I think we knew that coming into this incarnation or whatever, if you will. So, I hope that story finds you well and, you know, just look for the humor in it. You have any fun, stories from when you were in the military?
Oh, I got tons of them. Oh, boot camp memories. Oh, man. Yeah, I had a lot.
I
We
got
had
another
this.
funny one too after. Go ahead though.
Yeah, I can't think of any particular one. There's just all these incidences. Like I said, they wouldn't beat you like in the barracks, but they would wait until they got you to the range, and if you they or when we did combatives, uh, and then all of a sudden the first sergeant was this Filipino fucking kickboxing champ would fucking, okay, I want him in the ring with me right now. And then the next thing you know, there'd be like fucking a couple guys carrying this guy completely, his face, it looked like Rocky Balboa, like fucking just beat the fuck up. Because the first sergeant said he tried to kick me, because you're only supposed to like what do they call it, like get them in the seatbelt, like grapple them, so like so they come out swinging at you, and you're just supposed to fucking seatbelt them, and then they move on, and then the next guy comes. But this guy would say, oh, he tried to kick me, and you just beat the shit out of you. Or they'd wait till you got to the range, and they'll just say, well, they always inspect your weapon to see if there's a round in the chamber. They'll say that, oh, he pointed the rifle at me, and they just beat the fuck out of you. Like, so they got a rounded, no beating thing. But like you said, most of the time they just smoke you, like just PT you into your fucking, felt like you're gonna die. Like I remember being PT'd so much for hours on end that when we were towing the line in the barracks, and the drill sergeant's going up and down the fucking thing yelling at us, that I was looking across the bay, and there was the line of soldiers on the other line looking at me were just shadows. Like all I saw was a shadow. Like my mind couldn't construct that they were human beings anymore. I was like, oh God. But yeah, so many times, yeah, you would think you were gonna like get some sleep. Oh, it's 9 o'clock. It's 2100. We're gonna get some sleep, and then all of a sudden, some drill sergeant would come running in, like, oh, fucking push up position, like fuck. And then they're smoking in like 3 hours instead of you going to sleep, and you're just like, oh God, what did I do? What did I get myself into?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I remember one time we had an inspection coming up, so we had our dress shoes and we were spit polishing them. They teach us how to spit shine, and we were working on them really well. And then somebody fucked up, and we had outside the barracks, there was this giant sandbox. They called it the sand pit. And they're like, all right, put your dress shoes on. So everyone had their dress shoes on, and I didn't have my laces in mine. And I'm like running, trying to keep up. And we went into the pit, and we were doing like push-ups and like running in place and all these things with our brand new shoes that we just polished out. I was like, oh no. But the one story that came to mind was, so when you go to chow, you eat 3 times a day, and they don't really care. Like they want you to eat, like you can eat as much as you want, basically. So, but you're not supposed to take any food out of the barracks, but we would always take crackers, or like they had these small packages of cereal. So we'd always put them in our food, and then, or put them in our pockets, and then like eat them later or whatever. And this one guy across from me, same thing. Like you said, you line up, there's basically the way a squad bay works. There's 70 people in this big open like hall, right? And on one side, there's a line of bunk beds, and then there's a literal line drawn in front of them on the floor, which you have to line up. And then the other side, it's the same thing. And then the drill instructor would just walk up and down between you. One other thing, when this guy across from me, he's really funny dude, and he was like really built. And whenever the drill instructor was facing us, he'd like do these poses and like, like this to try to make us laugh. And we would always do it too, try to make them laugh. But one time, they were like, all right, everyone get online. So we're standing online. They're like, all right, grab your packs. So we just ran back and grabbed our packs, which our backpacks are just basically slung on the on each side of these bunk beds. So you just grab them. He's like, all right, dump them. So we all dumped them. And the guy across from me forgot that he had a bunch of cereal and crackers and stuff in there. So all this stuff just fell at the drill instructor's feet. And the look on his face, he was just like, because he was a smart guy. He wasn't like, some of these people in the Marines, whatever. But he was a smart guy. He was just like, fuck, what did I do? And we were in a rush to do something. And it was our senior drill instructor, because you have 4 of them. One's the senior. He's like, they say he's like your mom and your dad and whatever. He could be a hard ass, but he's usually pretty cool. And then you have one guy who's pretty cool, one guy who's a total asshole, and then one that's like in between. So we were with the drill senior, so he's pretty cool. And he's like, all right, he's like, I'll kill you later. He's like, we don't have time. He's like, clean that up. And then like a couple days later, the asshole drill instructor was with us, and he's like, he's going around, we're all in line, and he goes up to the guy. And another funny part of this was the guy's last name was St. Andrews, and they would call him Standrews, and it would really get to him. And I'm like, why are you letting that bother you, dude? Right. So he goes up to him, and he's this short little dude, and he's like, I smell crackers. He's like, Standrews, I smell crackers. And he fucking just like made all of us do all these push-ups and all this stuff until we, same thing. We're like seeing shadows or whatever. But yeah. Oh my God. It was hilarious. Oh, Shannon, she said similar. I went through the police academy. I may have laughed at this guy who was 4'9", looked like he was 12. Let's just say I did a great number of push-ups, and the group had to do the same wall sits. Oh yeah, wall sits were always great.
Uh, yeah, man. We had this guy in our fucking platoon. I'll never forget him, Baldwin. He was kind of like it, literally like in the movie A Full Metal Jacket, where Gomer Pyle. He was
Yeah.
always he was a fuck up. He was kind of slow. He was a nice guy, but he was like very slow, and he wasn't catching on. And he had a his bunkmate Barbados was like this fucking Samoan guy, and I think he's from Guam or whatever, but he was supposed to, just like in the movie how Joker took care of Gomer Pyle, like he would take care of Baldwin, and they're like, all right, your battle buddy has to make sure that you dress because you're too stupid to fucking get dressed, and it would be all kinds of things like you might not catch that Baldwin one day would put on green socks with his PT uniform instead of fucking white socks. Shit like that. And we're like, fucking, we get smoked for hours on end just because this one fucking guy. And he got smoked the entire time we were at basic training. And then like at the very last day before graduation, like he stood up and he's like, yo guys, I know I've been kind of a fuck up and I got you guys fucked up a lot, but he goes, I'm really sorry, blah, blah. And it was like, everybody, it was kind of, he was so genuine that we were like, oh, okay, poor Baldwin. But like he got us fucked up the whole time we were there. And then as you're saying, like we couldn't eat as much as we could. Like they would line us up at the chow hall and you would have 3 minutes to eat your entire fucking tray with a spoon. All you have is a spoon. And if anybody talked in your line of tables, the drill sergeant would be like, okay, line 3, whatever, get up, you're fucking done. Like, or they would randomly just do that just to fuck with you. Like you would sit down, you'd be like eating a couple spoonfuls and that's it. Line 3, get up, you're done. Like, but if you talked, automatically everybody at that table, that whole line of tables had to get up, even if they just sat down. And there's this guy, like, because we're all in alphabetical order, this Puerto Rican guy fucking like going on. He was like trying to talk and we're like, dude, shut up. And he's like, what? Don't talk to me like that. And we're like, shut the fuck up. We're like all whispering, like, shut up. Like, because we're all like starving. Like it was one of those times where you just had a long day and you were hungry. And this fucking guy, we're like, because like you were saying, some people are just in the military are just dick. They're fucking, I don't know the word. They're just dumb. Like it's like, dude, shut up. He's like, don't talk to me like that. And then the drill sergeant heard him, of course. He's like, oh, all the tables, get up. And then so we not only didn't get to eat, and then we got smoked when we got back to the barracks. Like it was like shit like that. 3 months of that, and then yeah, it gets a lot better after you finally get to your duty station.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think when I was in, it was 1994. It was a little different, and I also think something must have happened. And because I remember them saying something about a congressperson got involved with something that happened a year or two before. So they were being really strict on the drill instructors with that. Like if we had to ask to make a head call to go to the bathroom, like you'd still have, because you have to say everything in third person. So it'd be like, sir, Recruit Smith requests permission to speak to drill instructor Sergeant Hess, sir. And they're like, what do you want, Smith? Sir, Recruit Smith requests permission to make a head call, sir. And they're like, go. But if you fucked any part of that up, they would sit there and fuck with you. But they were pretty cool with that. But they did do that a lot to us too. Like, oh, I guess you're talking, you're done eating, that's it, get up. We're like, what the fuck? But I brought that up for some reason. One crazy story I could tell is we had the platoon behind us, because everything happens basically in order, right? And one of the first things they do when you get there is they bring you to swim qualification, and you have to jump into a deep pool, and you have like all your camouflage stuff on. You have your helmet, a fake rifle, a full pack, and you have to like be able to swim in the water with all that stuff. So that was really fun. I was a good swimmer, so I passed it, but just watching people, especially some of the dark green Marines is what they called them. Like there's no black and white. There's only light green and dark green. Well, some of the dark green Marines had problems swimming, but the platoon that went after us, this isn't really a funny story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So one of the sergeants there, one of the drill instructors was standing on the diving board, and he would be like, he said, eyeballs. And when they say that, you have to be like, snap, sir. And you look at him, and the fucking dude had a real rifle, and he just blew his head off, or blew his brains out or whatever. It's fucking crazy. So Yeah. So that's, you start taking shit too seriously, man. Boom, it's fucking crazy. But yeah, we had some really good times. Some really funny things happened when I was in boot camp. There was a couple guys drinking Listerine to try to get drunk, like
Yeah, guys in Afghanistan used to do that. Drink the Robitussin.
the Tussin. Well, I'd rather drink Tussin than Listerine, but still neither of them are. I don't know, man. Fun times in the old Marine Corps. There was something I was going to bring up, but I can't remember. So many memories flood back. It's crazy. We had one guy one time when we were marching. He just like out of nowhere he saluted this guy that was standing on the sidewalk, and the guy who was standing on the sidewalk was just a recruit that was about to graduate. So he was like in his dress uniform. And the drill instructor's like, "Congratulations, you idiot. You just saluted somebody who's like equal rank of you," or whatever. It was pretty funny. Yeah, but those guys are one really funny. So that you got to bring yourself back to 1994, because there's certain things people say now like, "Oh yeah, we know about that one," but this was 1994 and I'd never heard this before. But we're sitting around, and the drill instructor's giving us this class or whatever. We're all sitting Indian style. And he's like, "Somebody open a window. It's hotter than a nun's cunt in here." And we were like, just started laughing. And then all of a sudden, "Oh, you think I'm fucking funny? Boom, get in the pit." You know what I mean? But like these guys were professional comedians. They knew all these things to say. I'm like, and I went to Catholic school and I'd never heard that before. But then, afterwards, it's like, oh, everyone knows that joke, but yeah.
Yeah, and they have like you were saying with the other guy, the guy that they always call him like a fucked up name, like a nickname. They had a nickname for everybody. Like they used to call me Papa John. Like that's supposed to offend me, but it's like we had this one guy, like Indian kid from Alaska, like a native Indian kid from Alaska, and the drill sergeant be like, what tribe are you from? And he's like, Clinkit or something like that. Click click. No, drill sergeant, clink it, click click. Like, are you back talking me? Click click.
Yeah, there's this one guy, he had like a flat head in the back, so we all shaved heads, and they used to call him Flathead, and he would get so mad at it. And I was like, it was the same. It was actually the Standrews guy. It was the same guy. They really had his number, and he, I'm like, he was a smart guy. I'm like, why are you letting this bother you, dude? Like, But with us, there were Smiths, and so I was B because my last name is Smith. They called me Bravo, and there's this one Smith C. So usually they'd say Charlie, but they called him Cheesy because he was just kind of a fuck up, Yeah, it was good times in boot camp. Good times. I'm trying to think of some other funny stories. Yeah, people are resonating in the chat. Somebody was like, "Are you eyeballing me?" Yeah, exactly. "Are you eye fucking me? What do you, or if you, this one guy, he was from Baltimore. He was a dark green Marine, and he just had this attitude of like a street guy, and he didn't want to yell. He was just like, "Ah, sir," and they're like, "What are you whispering? Do you want to fuck me?" He's like, "You whispering at me, boy? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?" Oh man, shit's hilarious. Oh, El Jupiter says she has some homies, so she knows Tlingit. So I guess that's how you spell what you were saying. That's hilarious. That's a synchronicity. All right. Well, I guess we could wrap this up. It's been about 3 hours. That's usually the limit I do of these shows. I don't want to make them too crazy, but I thank you, dude, for coming on, man. I had a really good time. What a fun thing. We went from talking about like the they, the them, the craziness, all the way to funny boot camp stories. So
yeah, we could go on all night with the boot camp stories. So yeah, I guess now is a good time as any to wrap it up. And yeah, man, I had a lot of fun as well, and we could do this again sometime if you like.
yeah, totally. Thank you guys in the chat for hanging out. Adrian, she just got here. Whoa, I rolled in at the right time and right moment. Yeah, you did, but kind of not, because it's over. But guess what? With the grace of YouTube, it will exist. I don't think we said anything too damaging, so this one we shouldn't have any problems. I've actually only had one video removed from YouTube when I talked to some internet doctors in 2020, or some doctors, I mean, in 2020. One of those videos got taken down, which is hilarious. It's funny too, because that prank is like way over now, so it doesn't even matter. But what are you gonna do? We're at the mercy of the YouTube when we're on here using their platform. Thank you, YouTube, for letting us exist. We appreciate it. So Joe has a show called Contemplations of Spirit, and that is I put a link in the description so you can get some of that on YouTube, but a lot of the full episodes are on Telegram, and I believe the link is there as well, so you can find your way there. I highly recommend checking out his show. It's some really good stuff. If you like what he had to say here, check out his show. And there's a lot of stuff that you can get out of that. A lot of stuff I got out of that. So and my website is morelawsmoreproblems.com. You can go there for more Brandon goodness. And I also wrote a book. I'm currently writing another one, but I already did write one. And if you want to get the PDF, you can go to shadowworked.com, shadow the word, and then worked with ED at the end.com. And you could donate to me and I will send you that PDF or EPUB and check it out. I know Caribe Root in the chat has read it. Some other people read it. She really liked it. So check it out. Let me know what you think. It's basically, I talk a lot about my life and what I've seen, what I saw around the 7-Eleven with people's behavior around that incident around 2020. And then I talk about changing my own behavior and how that was and all that stuff. So good stuff in there, I say. And check out the Oversharing show this Thursday at 8:33 p.m. It premieres. We have our guest this week is Pat Life. That's right. I'm sorry about that. I had a brain fart for a second. Yeah, Pat Life is going to be on, so check that out. It was a really good conversation. And then next week it's going to be Chance Garton, who we talked to this Monday, but you'll see that episode up next Thursday. So check that out, and we'll see you guys later. Take care.
Peace.
Peace out, yo. All right, that's it. It's